Okay, it's mute. Okay, oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, we got it. Would you please rise for the pledge? Okay, we have one report. Dr. Washer, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. San Joaquin County has met the red tier criteria of the Blueprint for a Safer Economy, which means that schools in the county can offer in-person instruction for students at any grade level without a waiver or other exemption. We have been preparing for this for several months. We have been securing health and safety supplies and equipment, developing protocols for exposures and positive cases, and establishing procedures for school sites and district activities. Tonight, we ask the board to provide direction on how Lodi Unified School District will offer in-person instruction to our students with health and safety modifications in place and when that will start. Before we begin, I want to make 2 points. 1, regardless of the model we implement, this is not a return to the way schools operated before the health orders were given. Even if all students are in person each day, instruction and school operations will be different. As long as we are under health orders, modifications will be in place, impacting instructional strategies, school procedures, and school activities. 2, regardless of the in-person instruction model that we implement, we must follow appropriate procedures with our employee groups. I ask that everyone keeps these 2 factors in mind as we proceed this evening. I suggest the following process. I will go through the entire presentation. The board then asks questions. The board hears public comments. Then the discussion goes back to the board for comments and direction to staff. Based on the outcome of this meeting, I will bring a detailed draft report to the October 20th board meeting that will provide information on specific district operations and protocols in this health pandemic environment. Is that okay, Mr. Nava? Okay, we'll start with just an overview. I won't go into detail, but I think everybody's familiar with the Blueprint for a Safer Economy that the governor has put in place for the state. We are in the red tier. We have made that 2-week mark. It has been updated on today, actually, was the posting for the latest update. I've included in the report, if you have the attachment, the map that shows San Joaquin County and the data. This was as of October 6th. I've also included data from County Public Health that gives a chart on the data per week. So it shows how it's changed per week. And then the tier criteria in a little chart, the colored chart there is the tiered criteria. There is a new metric in place, the health equity metric, and this comes into play for tier movement. So it does not impact where we are tonight in talking about in-person instruction at this 2-week point of red. This comes into play when the county moves into orange or a different tier. There is information on the website about this and what it means. The overall gist of it is that all populations need to have access to a healthy lifestyle, and the state is now looking at different populations to make sure that there aren't disparities. And if there are, then County Public Health needs to develop a plan, which they are doing now, to address those disparities. The next page, again, is the chart of the criteria to move in colored tiers. Also, I've included an announcement about free COVID-19 testing on the next page, next slide. Every Monday from 8 to noon in Stockton, in front of Mountain Mike's Pizza on Wilson Way, if anybody is interested. And now the next slide starts our conversation for this evening about Lodi Unified School District. And please keep in mind that this was prepared as of October 9th. So at that point, we had some things in place, meeting with individual students, protocols, the waivers. Those no longer apply because we have met that 2-week mark. So yes, on the next slide, we did get into the red tier for the 1013 data posting. So there are options for the board to consider tonight on bringing students to school sites for in-person instruction. Basically, there are 3 options. You can stay on all distance learning. That is an option. But to bring students in for in-person instruction, basically there are 2 approaches, a hybrid model and a full or an all in-person instruction model. And the board may want to consider a phase-in approach to either of those models. I do want to note that once a school starts with in-person instruction, if the county goes back to purple, the school does not need to close. At that point, the school will be in the county criteria for closure based on cases and consultation with public health. So if the county does go back to purple once a school starts, the school does not have to automatically close, but the school has to be operating in some manner, even if it's just partially. So the hybrid model we've discussed before, but just as a refresher, this is basically a distance learning model. It is still a distance learning model, and I want to emphasize that, because most of the time is spent in distance learning. 3 days a week, students are doing their distance learning, and 2 days a week, they have the opportunity to come to school for in-person instruction. About 50% of the students are on campus at one time, and about 50% of the students are in a class at one time. Of course, this varies at the high school level. With student schedules, it is more complicated and complex to split classes right down the middle, half and half. So there will be variations at the high school level. On days when students are not at school, they're in distance learning. And the next slide shows what we had talked about previously with board, the most recent board direction regarding this particular model, if it were to be in place, was an A-B model where group A would be at school on Mondays and Tuesdays. Group B would be at school on Thursdays and Fridays. No students would be at school for in-person instruction on Wednesdays. The other model is the full in-person instruction model, where students are at school in classes each school day with health and safety modifications in place as practicable. The main differences between the hybrid and the full in-person are obvious, but I do want to point them out. With the hybrid model, there is less time with the teacher in person, of course. With a hybrid model, there is more opportunity for distancing of students in the class because there are fewer students, on campus because there are fewer students on campus. With the full in-person, there is obviously more opportunity for in-person instruction. They're there every school day with the teacher. There is less opportunity for distancing as all students will be in the class and all students will be on campus. But there are still things that can be put in place. So I also gave you just an example of what a phase-in model might look like. And there are variations of this, many different variations. This is just an example of what a phase-in could look like for a full in-person or even a hybrid. Starting with special day classes or special education population, and also perhaps the continuation high schools, Liberty and Plaza. They are not tied to the semester as other high schools are. And allowing Valley Robotics and Independent School to operate on their regular schedules. Independence, of course, most of it is remote anyway, but they do meet in person on a regular basis. And Valley Robotics Academy also does have in-person classes, but that is a smaller population, and they do have some remote learning as well. And then followed by elementary and middle schools, and then followed by high schools at the beginning of the second semester. That's just a consideration you might want to talk about. Giving students and teachers the opportunity to stay consistent with program instruction and learning for the remainder of the semester. We are at a point in November. We'll have some breaks with Thanksgiving. Getting close to the December break, getting close to finals, preparing for that, and perhaps a clean start the second semester with the new approach. Another way to do a phase-in approach instead of entire schools would be grade levels, perhaps starting with K3 and then adding 4-6. I mean, it could be any type of approach if that were something that you were interested in doing. So I've given you just some suggested timelines. This is just an example of what that might look like. Perhaps November 2nd, starting with that first phase of special day classes, the continuation high schools, and our 2 choice schools. Then perhaps on November 9, bringing on the elementary schools. Then perhaps on November 16th, adding the middle schools. And then perhaps at the beginning of the second semester, adding the comprehensive high schools along with Lincoln Tech Academy. And please keep in mind that Middle College High is on the San Joaquin Delta College campus. And so they follow their procedures, and they are on all distance learning for the next term as well. So they would not be returning to full in-person or hybrid if our other schools are. Just want to give a note. I'm not going to go over everything here, but we have been working on safety and health supplies and equipment. Warehouse is full, schools are stocked, and we have lots of things in place. We have lots of things on order. So this is just some of the things that we have in place. The next slide, some of the things that we have coming. Desk shields, air filter system for classrooms, hand sanitizer devices for buses. We also have been allocating extra funds for custodial services. And then the next slide, we are looking at an approach to temperature taking. This is not a requirement. It's part of the guidelines, but it's not a requirement. We do have the no-touch thermometers. That does obviously require someone to do that, to hold it and to take student temperatures. We are looking at a device that can be installed in a doorway or on a wall where an individual would just walk up to it and it would give a reading, a signal about the temperature, whether it was normal or not. It is for district-wide, it would be quite costly, about $2 million, but we do have CARES Act funding to cover that. So if that was something that you were interested in, we could pursue that. We would need to get on it right away in order to get them installed. But if this is not something you think is a good idea, we wouldn't proceed. But I wanted to bring that forward just for you to consider and give us input on that as well. So our discussion tonight, the first part of this doesn't apply because we are in red tier. So if we are, so now that we are on the red tier for 2 weeks, the board can discuss how and when to bring students to school sites for in-person instruction. And then depending on your directions or how this meeting proceeds, I will be bringing you a draft plan on October 20th that will have more specifics and details about our procedures and processes and include whatever direction you give us for your review at the next regular board meeting. Questions from the board?
Thank you, Dr. Washer, for your report. We're going to have some questions from the board if they have questions on the report. And then we're going to have comments from the audience, and then we're coming back to the board again. So we'll start out with Mr. Knaksack.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm on. Okay. Thanks, President Nava. Actually, I really appreciate what Dr. Washer has come up with this phased-in approach. I've been struggling with all kinds of different ideas and what would work, you know, AA, AB, and all that. It's not really a question. It's just my gut right now. I'm telling you that I like the idea of this phase-in approach. I like the timeline that she has come up with. I would like to add one thing to at least in the high school level. I would like to see the classes being live streamed. In the event that there are some students that may not feel comfortable about going back to school full time, and I think I brought that up once upon a time, and our CBO mentioned that it probably would be something that's doable. So that's something I would like to add into this conversation. But as being the first up to bat, I really like the phased-in approach, and I'm behind that one. And that's it for now, Mr. Nava.
Gary, do you have any comment on the temperature apparatus?
It sounds kind of space age to me, and you know, I'm afraid my mind goes to high schools. I don't seem to think that's worthwhile. I think if we have all the PPEs in place, we have as much distancing as we can get. We have hand sanitizing. I think at this point, in January, that's probably overkill.
Thank you, Gary. George, Mr. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. I'll start off with the thermometers. I don't think we need to spend another $2 million on the safety vision thermometer. We have, what I understand, that we have plenty of the no-touch thermometers. And, you know, as a teacher, I would have loved to have one of those in my classroom when somebody was feeling ill to be able to take their temperature. So that's something that we can use even after this is done. So I think that's a good way to go. So I would not be in favor of using that safety vision thermometer. I got a couple of things I'd like to talk about. First of all, I want to agree with Mr. Connect said that I also like the phased-in approach. And I like the idea of not starting all grade school classes at the same time. In other words, not doing 1 through 6 or K through 6 on the same day. That can get confusing, and you probably need a little bit of extra time to work with those K3, because things are going to be different when kids come back to school. There's going to be one-way hallways. There's going to be things like that. So I would, I really do support the phased-in approach. And what I'd like to see, probably tied with that, is a little bit more flexibility to our school sites. The administrators, the principals and vice principals at our school sites, they know their school, they know their kids, they know their families. We probably need to give them a little more leeway in how we set this up. There's need to be definite guidelines, no doubt about it. But anytime you have guidelines, you're going to have exceptions to that as well. And I think we need to be ready for those. Let's talk about the high schools for just a second. I agree for a large part that high school classes are doing much better under distant learning than our grade school classes are, particularly our K3. But some of our high school classes probably need to be in person, particularly some of our classes at Lincoln Tech, probably are some of our ag classes. And so that goes along with what I was saying about giving a little more leeway to our particular, to our principals and our particular schools, because they can make that decision. If some of these classes need to come back to have the maximum impact, then maybe that's something that we should do. I've got a couple questions too. I want to talk about Dr. Washer. The number of minutes in class daily has been reduced by the state. Are you planning to do that with if we go back to a level 3, or are you planning to do a maximum day?
At this point, the conversation has been the regular time frame of the schedule. We have not been talking about reducing the minutes. That is absolutely a possibility.
Okay. And the reason I ask, because I think one of the things is reduce exposure time as well. So that might work. We might do the synchronous and asynchronous model where math, English are done in person in class on synchronous, and then social studies and science maybe. And I'm just talking grade school right now. And I'd like to. That would be an asynchronous classes. So maybe if you did your limited time on site and then use those on going home, that's a possibility as well. So I'd like us to just at least think about that. What about those students that don't want to come, or whose parents don't want them to come back to school? They want to continue distant learning throughout the year. What's our plan for those?
Mr. Neely, members of the board, secondary students who had enrolled in or indicated that they wanted the all distance learning option have been scheduled into digital sections. So they would continue in their digital sections. They would also have the opportunity to go to in-person classes for those classes that are not offered digitally. If there is space allowed, they work with their counselor in the school site on those types of things. But those who have signed up for that originally have already been scheduled into digital sections, so that would continue. The elementary is a different story. Right now, all students are with their classroom teachers. There is no separation at this point, so we would have to adjust either classes for that, or there are several different options. We could contract it out. There are different ways to approach that for those who did elect to have the all distance learning when that was available to sign up.
Okay, thank you. And one final thing, I'd like us all to look at anyway. I'm not advocating this as the end all solution, but a hybrid can be a number of things. It can be the schedule that you propose, or it can be a number of different things as well. One possibility is a morning and afternoon type situation where you have reduced time in the morning, reduced time in the afternoon, two different groups. That helps you with your social distancing and all that, but everybody gets to come back in some way. Again, with that, you would use that synchronous and asynchronous setup where the morning would be math and English for one group. They would then proceed to do the asynchronous science and social studies in the afternoon, and then vice versa for the other group. So that's a possibility as well, and it would have kids in school 5 days a week. So I'm sure I'm going to come up with some more before this meeting is over with. But again, Dr. Washer, thank you for all your work on this. Thank you for your staff for all the work on this. And thank everybody for all the emails that we've received. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. Don't thank everybody, but most of you sent some really nice emails and with some great suggestions. And many people recognized how much time we have put into this. I appreciate the links that were sent to me as well, although I think I've read everything from the CDC, the CDE, possibly even the FBI. I don't know, but I've read just about as much as I possibly can on this. And there's a lot of opinions. And by the way, the emails of late have been split about 50-50. So we're going to make some people happy and some people maybe not quite so happy. That's all I've got, Mr. Nava. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Mr. Heberly.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. I appreciate it. I do have a couple of questions. One of the things that wasn't mentioned in the report, and I don't even know if it applies or not, that would be adult school. Where would they come back? if they've been gone.
Yes, we certainly could add that to the first phase. I think that might be appropriate. Actually, could go anywhere, but we certainly could add that.
Okay. Well, and I think that would be a certain grouping of students, and I think that would be very beneficial for those in the adult school community, and then they could start sooner, and then the Lincoln Tech would come later. So, okay, that would be one. Let's say we are in red, which we are, and the county ends up going back to purple. Now, and according to a schedule, we have kids in school. Let's say elementary's in school, but high school has not started yet, because we're going to phase it in, as an example. The elementary can stay in school, because when you were explaining it, you were saying school, not district. So does that then mean that the high schools cannot go?
That would be yes, if there was nobody having instruction on the high school campus. I believe that the first phase was all special education, special day classes. So since the special day class at the high school would have started, then the school can continue with the phase in, as long as students are there in some capacity and there is a phase-in plan. We can continue with the phase-in plan, even if the county goes to purple. But if nobody starts, then we have to wait till we get that 2-week red again.
Okay, very good. That's good to hear. I was kind of worried that if things did flare, that now we're stuck and we're behind the 8 ball and we can't go back. So that's good to hear. I like that. On the phase-in, I like that. Of course, you've all heard me. I wish we had gone back weeks ago, but that's just not possible. So, my way of thinking is to go back as soon as possible. And I like the way you broke it up with the November 2nd, November 9th, November 16th, that kind of thing. I think that's pretty logical. So with the high school part, my question is, why the phase in for high school being basically 2.5 months after elementary, according to this report?
Mr. Heavily, members of the board, the thinking behind that was continuity and consistency in program for the remaining of the semester, knowing what happens at this time of year, and students preparing for the end of the semester, getting ready for finals, the November break coming up soon. It just seemed to provide some consistency for students at this point in the year to finish the semester out and start the new way of instruction at the second semester. If you'd like, Mr. Palmquist can certainly add to that more details. Mr. Palmquist.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board, and Dr. Washer. When we go back, whenever that is, we will need to make some adjustments. As Dr. Washer shared at the high school level, we built digital sections based on the information we had prior to the school year. So those 3 weeks leading up into the school year, we scheduled students based on the preferences they shared with us. Since that time, things have changed. People's minds and attitudes have changed. And we will, when we make those changes, whether that's at the semester or some other time earlier than that, we will need to shuffle that around. And so anytime there's schedule shuffling, it can create, class changes, teacher changes. And so if the board is interested in a phase-in approach, that might be one consideration for them to think about is, a week or two prior to finals, what class changes could do for some students. I can give you a great example. Some students maybe said, we want digital learning. We put them in a, digital learning schedule. Maybe there was a couple of on-site classes they wanted. They have that schedule. Maybe something's changed since July in their family. I know that our school sites numbers fluctuated greatly on the people who had demand for that type of instruction. And when we come back, they're going to say, you know what, now I want in-person instruction. Well, we need to get them seats in those classes. And so if there's no room in those classes, we're going to have to either open up some sections, or we're going to have to do some things. We have strategies to do that. And we can do that quite quickly. But doing that, the thinking might be doing that prior to the end of a semester may create a lack of consistency for teachers and students. However, it's not a matter of preparation. The sites can affect those changes whenever we receive that direction. I think if you're considering a phase-in approach, that's just one thing to be aware of. Scheduling changes and movement based on people's attitudes or what we would need to accommodate their wishes could have that effect. We'd like to do it all at one time, or as much at one time as possible. So that can happen before then, or it can happen at a natural break. And we can do that really at any time.
Thank you. Got to have a green button, So I'm really happy to hear that it's not because it can't happen sooner or that we're not prepared to do it sooner. All it would mean is instead of shuffling those classes later, we would shuffle those classes earlier. We're still going to do it. It's just an earlier time. With the phase-in, I think that's it seems logical to me. But I'm looking at if we're going to do all of elementary on the 9th, which there are more elementary students than there are middle or secondary students. I would actually like to see us do middle school and high school on November 16th. What that does is it still gives 5 weeks, I think a day less than 5 weeks, to do that shuffle and do that preparation. And that's still then on another good point is that would give our students 4 weeks of in-person instruction. And I really think that's huge because, there are other board members, Mr. Connexted is one of them that, and of course others, because CTE has been a big push for our district. We want kids to have those life skills, and it's much better if you're taking those kinds of courses, like we say, project-based learning, and it could be ag, it could be a ton of different classes that we offer. That allows kids just that much more doing time instead of observing time. So I do like your phase-in model, and I appreciate your answer as to why and the adult school and all that. I appreciate your answers to my questions. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Oh, and Mr. Navi, you wanted about the temperature, the thermometers. I don't. My preference would be is that there is not a need for that. I think what we have would fit the bill instead of those other devices. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Heberly. Mr. Porter. Go see this way.
Mr. Heberly stole some of my questions, which was good. First of all, I took a class today in finance from CSBA, and I want to thank Mr. Kahn. We had districts from all over the state that were in the Zoom session, and our district compared to others is doing really well. So my thanks to you and your staff. they had a lot of things to talk about, and we kept saying we're fine on that issue, we're fine on that issue, and we looked very good for that. So, Mr. Khan, thank you. I know I've been a big critic, and I also believe in giving praise when it's due. So, thank you for that. Also, to Dr. Washer and her staff for putting this report together. I appreciate your time and effort. Those are two very important things. I just have a couple questions because I believe this is the question section, not the opinionated section. Okay. I have a feeling that you skirted distance learning on the elementary. Why is that? I felt that distance learning for elementary was skirted. What I mean by that is we didn't give much weight to parents that want their kids to be on distance learning that are at the elementary level. Was there a reason for that, or you still open to new suggestions, you and Scotty? I just had a question about that.
Yes, Mr. Porter, members of the board, thank you. Yes, it is something that we need to work out details. We need schools have been working on their parent list that did sign up for all distance learning to find out who is still interested. The challenge with that is that for many parents, it depends on the outcome of tonight. Hybrid versus in person may dictate a parent's decision on whether to stay in their all distance learning or to come into in person. So that has been a challenge up to this point. So we would need to revisit that grouping to see who is going to commit to that. And then we can look at what model would be most effective and efficient. I'm going to be perfectly honest. If we think that we're going to get a whole set of teachers to do either the distance learning or to replace those who do distance learning, that is not going to happen. There's not a pool of candidates out there. Same as, at the beginning of the school year, it's not the time, and we're still in a teacher shortage mode. So that would be extremely difficult if we thought that we were going to hire additional teachers for this effort. Mr. Nava, are you?
Oh, sorry.
So that okay? Okay. The other option is to work out something within the school itself. We know that option may cause class changes for students, not only those who are on distance learning, but those who are in person. There may be reshuffling of students with different teachers. There may be reshuffling of teachers within their school to different grade levels. We would hope to not have that type of chaos at this point in the year for children and teachers. We don't think that would benefit students or teachers at this point to reshuffle things. There's also an option of contracting out. We've talked about that briefly in the past. We haven't talked about that in much detail, but if that were something the board wanted us to look into, we could certainly do that. That would be create a temporary situation that would fill the need, and then we could do something different for the next year. It's my understanding that the board is interested in continuing this type of service for parents who prefer that even after this year is over, this health pandemic situation is over. So yes, Mr. Porter, I did skirt it a little bit. That's a little bit more detail.
Thank you. But we did promise the Distance Learning Academy for even next year, pre or hopefully post-pandemic, that we'd have that available for parents as an avenue if they chose to go that way. Is that correct?
Mr. Porter, members of the board, we did tell parents that there would be a distance learning option this year. We did not use the term academy, as that is a different type of model that could be created for next year when we're in a position where we could hire more teachers to create that academy.
Okay. Now you say hire more teachers. You haven't taken into account the fact that some teachers might not be able to do full or hybrid teaching, and they might still be able to do distance learning. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is a possibility. Those teachers would be leaving a classroom situation, and there would be children there who would need a teacher.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at this. If you're losing students, you potentially could have teachers being displaced that then can go on distance learning. That's kind of the way I was looking at it. And of course, that would be district wide, that the distance learning class at the elementary level would be a district wide class. And if we lost students to DL, we'd also lose a teacher somewhere in there, given that the numbers would change.
That is
So-
correct. And
so-
that would cause the reshuffling of classes at the school sites that I mentioned before, where kids would maybe have different teachers, teachers maybe have different grade levels. It would cause that reshuffling. But yes, you are correct.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm assuming that based on, after we hear from comments from the community, that and we come together as a group and arrive at some decision, that a parent survey will go out asking for whether you want to be on distance learning or do you want to go on whatever we choose, the hybrid, the phased in, or we come back full altogether. So is a parent survey going to go out? Oh, I shouldn't call it a survey, a choice, whether they want their children on distance learning or going back. I mean, I just say distance learning, period.
Mr. Porter, members of the board, we had not planned on reopening that process. We had gone through that before. Our intent was to go to that group that originally requested all distance learning and determine their preference at this point. Please keep in mind that those students who requested distance learning have already been, the secondary have already been scheduled into digital sections. So another onslaught may cause some other challenges with that. We certainly will do what the board wishes, but our intent was not to reopen that process, but to use the process that we already have in place and contact those parents. Of course, parents can always contact their school if they're concerned about something and wanted something different, but we had not planned on reopening that entire process.
My concern there is it might be that a family has had an event that might have affected their position on COVID-19, and they might want to go to distance learning, or they might want to come off. So I do believe we owe it to the community, this is my only opinion, that we offer that option to them because they might have changes based on, as we know, the virus has given us more information as it's spread throughout our community. That's just my idea. Thank you, though, for the answers. I have a couple more. We are going to have COVID cases, both in our employees and in our students. Do we have an individual that is running contact for the COVID cases, for contact tracing? I noticed that the testing, free testing at least, is only found in Stockton, down in Lathrop or French Camp. Is that correct?
The one I showed as an example was on Wilson Way in Stockton.
Okay, well, that was Wilson Way, but there are none in Lodi. Okay, I only saw those two that in your presentation.
Yes, I didn't share everything that's out there.
Understood. I just thought those two were the only free place we go. Are we going to have somebody that's going to be able to coordinate the COVID situation so that the board, your exec board and so forth is up to date with any events that might be happening in regards to the disease breaking out and what we're doing at each facility? I know that the administrators have protocol and so forth, but it seems to me that we need somebody, not full time. I mean, it would be on a contract, maybe somebody that's retired. That could be our COVID-19 czar, handle the equipment, handle the cases, make sure protocols being followed, making administrators are following up. I do know of a principal, not in our district, that because of employee was worried about telling anybody about the possibility of COVID-19 exposure, didn't say anything, came to work after being in contact with somebody with a COVID-19, came to work, was tested, didn't hear anything, and then tested, came a positive. And so during that time, after he, her, whatever, had come in contact with an individual close to them, they came to work, were tested, but didn't tell anybody there was a possibility of being exposed, and then expose people, which caused, even though they're on distance learning, the facility to be closed down, numerous people to be tested. So I feel that, and I know Mr. Holliday is a very, very experienced individual, that's too much for him to handle. I know that maybe it was a month ago, Mr. Khan brought forth to us a change in personnel where we were going to have somebody that was going to handle the COVID-19. I believe the board was reticent in where that was positioned. I could be wrong. I do have lapses in memory at times, but I was hoping that we'd have somebody that would be responsible for dealing with COVID-19, at least on the short term.
Was that a comment or question? It's a question. Thank you, Mr. Porter, members of the board. Yes, right now it is current staff and it is out of Mr. Khan's business services department. We do have protocols and procedures in place, but as you did note, and we appreciate that, this is a daunting task for someone who already has a full-time plus job. That would be a great asset, and we would greatly appreciate having someone on a short-term contract to help us coordinate this and track and those types of things for COVID-19. At the next board meeting, Mr. Khan is bringing back that position that he shared with you previously in a report about the risk management facilities position, which could also take some of this, but that too would be other duties as a full-time job. So I love the idea of having some extra help during this crunch time. That would be greatly appreciated.
I have one last question. Sorry, I'm being long-winded. Instead of I do believe thermometers are important, but the extra 2 million, of course, if we do somebody on a short contract, it'd be a lot less than $2 million. My last question deals with, do we have on our website, because I don't check it that frequently, and that's my issue. Do we have on our website a place where parents can directly go for COVID-19 in terms of symptoms, testing, and then what's going to happen at their schools? And I don't mean it's under business services. I mean a button that they can just push. They could go to our website and there it is. This is a pandemic. It's killed over 210,000 people. We have been in purple. Now we're going to red. Is there any way, and I'm not sure, is there a button on our website where you can directly go?
Yes, Mr. Porter, members of the board, I want to thank Chelsea Von Geer for keeping that piece of our website up to date. She has been very diligent in putting resources, information, not only about district procedures and protocols, but also community resources, a wealth of information. So yes, she has been updating that and will continue to do so. And that's separate from Mr. Khan, and Mr. Khan would like to comment if that's okay.
Thank you, Superintendent Washer, Mr. Nava, members of the board, Mr. Porter. I'd also like to thank Technology Services for putting on the light blue ribbon at the top of every single web page in the district, the COVID-19 link to precisely that kind of information. So any web page in the district that any community member accesses, there is that item COVID-19. All anybody has to do is click on it.
And I don't know if Mr. McGilligan can answer this or not. Maybe he can, or Mr. Khan. If somebody, administrator, teacher, para, CSEA, I don't know what, skirts the issue of contacting when they've come into, whether they have COVID-19 or been in contact with somebody with COVID-19, and they come to work anyway, do we have any teeth in a penalty? Because they're putting a great impact on the school by waiting, by not informing. And of course, we're not trying to expose them as being lepers or things like that, but it does allow us to then take into our protocols that Mr. Khan has brought out. Is there any teeth into what we can do if a principal, say, has been exposed, but yet comes to work and hasn't followed what we have established? Just curious question. I'm going by what had happened to an individual. I know a principal. There was nothing they can do about this individual. and ended up exposing three other people, and the entire room had to be disinfected, 2 rooms, and then they had to notify everybody on campus, even though they're on DL, just in case you came in contact with that individual. So it seems to me there's a big impact if people decide to not use a sick day and say, hey, I've been exposed, or use part of I believe is it the CARES Act, Mr. Khan, or workmen, don't they have 10 days where they can stay home?
But I'll defer to Mr. McKilligan. He's more of an expert on that.
Okay. Mr. McKilligan? Your mic's not on.
I think if an employee does something that's inappropriate, the supervisor could apply the rules of progressive discipline. It's on. Can you hear me? Okay, so if an employee does something inappropriate, their supervisor could certainly apply the rules of progressive discipline. That would be the recourse.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Ms. McFarland.
Thank you, President Nava. I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Washer and all of the cabinet. I know how many hours were put in on this and how many hours you've been putting in since the beginning of COVID, so I appreciate it. Whether anybody else knows, I know your board knows. Lots of late nights, lots of early mornings, lots of weekends, so we appreciate it. I wanted to make sure that special ed will continue no matter what color we're in. Okay, that was one of the clearance things. Thank you. The full schedule, I like the phase-in approach. I also like the opportunity, or if we had the opportunity of a half-day model with the last 2 hours being some type of an on-site. I don't know how it would work out with minutes, but that would be something that I would be curious about. The temperature. Well, I think the freestanding temperature taker apparatuses would be fine. I do like the idea of the walkthrough. I just am curious if it does anything but temperature. Can it be retrofitted at a later date to serve a different need if the district so needed it? Because I find it interesting, $2 million is not a high price to do that district wide. Having looked at some of these things, but just to take temperature, I think it's a little overkill based on when we'll get them in and get them installed and we're moving. But I like the idea if it can be retrofitted to do other things. I'm looking at my notes as I work through this. I'm concerned about the all distance. I think it's very important that if whichever direction we move, that it's very clear to our families, so they know exactly what they're getting with a distant learning component if they choose to stay that, because I think they know what they're going back to if they choose to go back to the classroom. But I think that the distance, if they stay all distant, I think we need to be very clear about if it's going to have a teacher or it's going to be just online or a combination of the two, and how many hours and what it's going to look like. I'm also want to say thank you to Dr. Khan or Mr. Khan. We're hearing lots of things. I was also in the same classes with Mr. Porter today, lots about PPE and what's happening in other districts. So thank you for being so on point with getting our PPE. Having said that, I would love to know from all principals before we're up and running that the principals clearly can tell the board, each and every site can tell us that yes, we have what we need and we're clear about what we have and the stock that we have, and maybe a weekly update, not necessarily from principal, but from each site. Because what I don't want to hear is emails from teachers and other staff that we don't have what we need, but yet we're hearing they have it. And based on what I have seen and heard, we are more than prepared and more than ready, even with a few things hanging. So those are some of my concerns. Want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I hope whichever plan we go with, and this is just sidebar, and I know we'll have our comments later, that we can work to a mutual benefit for not only the teachers, but families and students, because I think that's in everyone's best interest. So I think you're onto something. I think we're moving in the right direction. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland. Mr. Freitas.
Thank you, President Nava.
I think everybody in this room wants kids back in the classroom as quickly as possible, but also as safely as possible. So I don't think that can be stated enough. And I thank Dr. Washer and your staff for this report. I do have a couple follow-up questions. How many California schools are opening at this time?
Mr. Freitas, members of the board, we don't have an exact number. Chelsea Von Geer has actually taken the lead statewide in trying to figure this out by getting a Excel spreadsheet out to all the PIOs in the state to try to ask them what the status is, if they're open, if they're planning to open, if they're hybrid or full. Of course, we can't require folks to answer, so information has come in a little bit and trickling in. So I can't give you an answer on how many, but we can certainly give you an update on the information that we have at this point.
How many schools in the nation are opening?
Well, I have no idea.
We have no idea approximately how many of the other 1,050 school districts in the state of California are opening at this time. Do we have a seat of the pants guess for tonight's report? Because I do recall that when we were talking about this meeting, that was information that was going to be presented tonight, and I don't see it in the report.
Mr. Freitas, we cannot tell you how many districts in the state of California are opening. We do not have that information, is not collected anywhere. We have contacted several. We have looked up several on websites. We are gathering as much as we can. I have sent board information about districts and their plans, both down south, Bay Area, and also around us. That is what we have at this point.
And what information is that so the public could hear it too?
Have it in front. I do not have it in front of me. We know that in Orange County, there are school districts that are opening. In San Joaquin County, Ripon is open K3. They're doing a phase-in for the rest of their grade levels. We know that other school districts in the county are working on hybrid models. There is one district that is working on a full in-person return. Most of those are around the mid-November time when they are planning to open. Know that there are school districts that have decided to stay on all distance learning through the end of December. San Jose is one of them. Aspire Charter had made that announcement previously that they're staying on all distance learning. So there are, I think there was one, Fairfield Suzanne, that just announced that. Those are some examples.
So the plan that you're proposing here tonight, you know of no district in the state that's going to be implementing it under this time schedule?
This exact time schedule?
Yes.
No, I know that there are school districts around us that are looking at mid-November timeframe. And some of them are doing hybrid, some of them are doing full.
But if I understand correctly, well, maybe I can ask that. What is staff's recommendation on this?
Of course, we will do what the board would like to do. Personally, my recommendation would be to do a phase-in approach. I think that makes sense. I do like the idea of high schools starting fresh the second semester. So the phase-in approach is what I would recommend. If that's what you're looking for.
And as it stands though, right now, no school district in the state of California or in the nation, you can tell us here tonight, is going to be implementing that plan. We would be at the tip of the spear, so to speak, in executing that.
I do not believe that is true. No, there are schools that are open. Oakview in our county is open, full. There are schools throughout the nation that are open full.
There is quite a difference between Oakview and the 30,000 students that we have at Lodi. Is that correct?
Yes, it's one school.
All right. Okay. So do we know of any school districts similar to us in size that would be implementing this plan that you're asking for us to do tonight?
I cannot tell you for certain that there is a school district in California that's implementing this exact plan. I think everybody has the different timelines. There are some that are doing hybrid. There are some that are doing full in-person. This specific exact plan, I cannot tell you that anybody is doing this exact time frame.
Indemnification. What has changed since we last discussed indemnification 2 months ago?
Nothing has changed. The discussion that we had previously was, I believe, in relation to a waiver, which part of the waiver that the board had to sign off that would indemnify the county. This is not a waiver process, so there is no board signing off of that piece of it. But in terms of indemnification, there is nothing in that area at this point. So nothing has changed.
If we were to say today that the board wants the schools to open tomorrow, would that be possible, or would we require MOUs with our bargaining groups?
We would need to negotiate impacts and effects. So that would need to be part of the process.
What changes would be required for us to implement the plans physically on our campuses were we to use the phase-in model? What is, or are we good to go? We can move on this today, in staff's opinion.
Mr. Freitas, members of the board, there wouldn't need to be any physical changes to any facilities other than installing the hand washing stations that some of them have been placed, but we do have many more that have not. So that would need to happen. If we're not installing any temperature type things, then that would not be an issue. It would be more procedures and processes in terms of traffic flow, lunch, recess, passing periods, those types of things that would need to be in place, but not as far as the physical plant itself.
So no passing out of masks, no installing of sneeze guards. I mean,
yes, we certainly have the PPE that would be delivered to the school sites, but I thought the question was what changes to the facility would need to be made. But in terms of the PPE being delivered.
I apologize if I also kind of meant the process or what would be different than when we close school, or what would we have to do if we were to pull the trigger on this tonight? Are we good to go tonight, or are things still in the way? And I apologize if I cut you off.
No, thank you. I understand the question now. Yes, all of the PPE is in our hands. Most of it is at the school sites, enough to get started anyway. We would just need to figure out a system or timeline to keep that going at the school sites. School sites have developed procedures for traffic flow, entrance, egress, passing periods, the cafeterias, transportation. So yes, buses, we are looking at hand sanitizer devices on the bus itself. We're still researching whether that's going to be allowable. If not, there would be hand sanitizer for kids when they come on the bus. I think that's food service there would be no change in food service. There would be change in procedures in terms of cleaning protocols that we have in place already. The custodians would implement the procedures that are in place in terms of sanitizing the classrooms, sanitizing the restrooms. Those things would happen more frequently than they would in a non-pandemic situation. So cleaning would be increased. We are looking for more custodial time. So that's a difference from pre-pandemic. number of people in the offices, how parents, visitors are treated. That's different in this situation than a non-pandemic situation. So those types of procedures, yes, will be different. There will be no large group activities, no assemblies, those types of things. Meetings would be virtual, parent meetings, PTA type things, back to school event type things, open houses, those would be virtual because we would need to follow the health orders. So those types of things would be different. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
No, I think that's very helpful and useful information. What about social distancing in the classroom?
With the hybrid model, distancing is possible. I still don't think that 6 feet everywhere is possible, which is what we have been learning about from all the experts in terms of social distancing. We all think of 6 feet, but there would be more distancing in a hybrid environment in the classroom and outside, in spaces outside, and in the cafeteria. In the everybody return model, there could be no expectation for distancing in a classroom. You can't do that with even the 24 kids in the K3, the 30 plus in the 4-6 and secondary. There would not be distancing. They would do as much as they can, remove furniture that may not be absolutely necessary to allow for more space. But in the hybrid model, yes, there could be distancing. In the all back, no, there could not in the classroom.
And the board could go according to the color chart. Now that we're in red, we could approve an all-in plan tonight.
Yes, that is permitted.
That would not have social distancing.
That is correct. It would not have. It would be as practical as we can. The classroom definitely would not be able to be as much distancing as a hybrid. Perhaps outside it could be better, but in the classroom you would have all students there.
What about the hybrid model? Are we locked into this hybrid model, the AA day off BB, or are there other options that staff is open to?
We are not locked into any model. This was presented in this manner because this was the most recent board direction in terms of a hybrid, and this was a while ago when the board had discussed a hybrid model. But absolutely, there are a variety of ways this can go. You are not locked into anything.
Which model do you prefer?
I prefer the model that's presented here. We did, when we were looking at this, we were talking to public health officials, and the advice was the 2 days in a row with the same group helped with cohorting, helped with identification and contact tracing if there were an issue, provided a better opportunity for cleaning on that Wednesday off. This was the model that seemed to check the most boxes in terms of a public health perspective.
I see. Okay. I'm going to reserve the rest of my comments till after for the public comment. I will get my 2 cents about thermometers. I think temperature taking is very important. And we have a fixed thermometer for me to get into the courthouse every single day, and it's never once taken my temperature accurately. So I have absolutely no faith in what it does or what it doesn't. On the other hand, at our workplace, we did assign the job to someone to take thermometers to come into the district attorney's office. That person contracted the COVID. So I don't have I just have those 2 stories. None of them are good. So anyway, thank you, President Nava.
Mr. Freitas. I'd like to have some questions first. Mr. Palmquist, you guys recommended the first semester distance learning. What's your preference?
Dr. Washer? Thank you, President Nava. What is my personal preference? If we're going to do a phased-in approach, I think that timeline makes sense because I think the closer we get to a break, the more disruptive the shuffling that we'll do to accommodate what folks have wanted and what they are likely to want as we try to make all that happen. I think that would be a distraction. So if it's a little bit further back from the break, as has been discussed tonight, I think that adjustment can set in before we get to the end. So it really is about a phased in approach or not. If we're going to do a phased in approach and high school is going to come in at the back end like that, I do favor pushing it out a couple extra weeks to not have that disruption right before finals. If we're not going to do a phased in approach and we do it a little bit earlier, then we would have the time to make to make those adjustments before it would impact the end of a term. You've been a high school teacher, you know how it is when things transition. That can sometimes be problematic for students and teachers. So my preference is really just it's contingent on whether or not it's a phased in approach or not. If it's going to be phased in, then I think it makes sense to wait, as Dr. Washer said.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Mr. McGregor, elementary students, would they be attending school the whole day if we go in full?
Yes, can you hear me? As Dr. Washer has presented, the phase-in approach is something that I think has been laid out and makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, it would be a regular school day. I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Okay, Mike, going to school in full, you will start elementary school. All the kids will come to school, right? On that certain day.
Yes.
Okay, so there's no phase-in. It's either your phase-in is the dates only. To me, it's the dates that you start. In other words, if you start November, I can't recall the dates there. November 2nd, I think. November 2nd, you start, and then the next week the middle school start, and then
right.
Yeah. So there you perceive no problems there.
No, sir.
Okay. The other thing is, and I know we've talked about it, is the safety preparation, Mr. Khan. The safety preparation. In other words, if we go, are we prepared for all?
In terms of PP, we are, yes, sir, absolutely. You have more than enough to start school. In terms of the processes that the superintendent spoke of just shortly ago, we're very close. We're the staff is finalizing approaches to the custodial work during a full in-person return and for a hybrid return as well. The pandemic plan is evolving. It's getting to the point where I think it can, if the board did direct full contact tracing, if the state directed that, if the county office of our public health service directed it, our current process could easily migrate to that outcome as well, or that purpose as well. So, Mr. Nava, you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Another thing is I like the high schools to start the second semester. Number one, I think athletics will be prepared because they're going to do it like preseason, and then you start school, and then that's when the game starts. Whether it's all winter, or all fall sports that you have, I think that would be a nice fit in for our athletes to do that. Another thing is, at one time, and I've talked to the $2 million is peanuts with a care, because you have to spend it by December 30th. But being that the temperature is not required, is that correct, Dr. Washer?
Mr. Nava, members of the board, that is correct. It is in the guidelines, but it is not a requirement at this point.
Okay, that not being a requirement, then we can use the punch thermometers. We don't need I don't think we need to spend the $2 million. At one time, I was adamant about it. Oh yeah, that's great. We're first ones to go, and then Mr. Freda says it never takes a temperature, right? Maybe you have high and low temperature, Mr. Freda. Who knows? But again, right. I like the safety part of it, and I like what the administrators at the high school and elementary level like. I think you people put a great effort in setting these up. As a matter of fact, I was talking to Dr. Washer. I had some vision of those starting school at a certain periods of time when I first saw it, way before you printed this. I think you sent it on an email on confidential, and I said, "Oh, I'm just thinking about the same thing I am." But I like that. I think that it's going to be up to the board tonight to decide what kind of model we want to go to, and I'd just like to tell the audience out there that it's the decision of the board tonight. I'd like to ask Valerie, how many comments do we have from the audience?
Mr. Nava, right now we have 24.
24. Wow. Okay. I'm going to make this with the board's permission, is to give those people 2 minutes, and then we're cutting them off right away because that takes a lot of time. And we're going to hear again a lot of the audience on our next meeting on the 20th, because that's the nitty-gritty thing about getting something done, something to start out with. Okay, so I'm going to give these audience 2 minutes to tell us what they need and what they want. And Valerie, would you keep track of the minutes, and then we'll 10 minutes to go, announce that their time's almost over, and then we'll finish at 2, so we can at least, well, I said 24, so that's 48 minutes. Are we in tune?
Yes.
Okay, let's start with the first one.
First person is Chris Christie.
All right, Chris, you're on.
Yes. Okay, that person is no longer with us. We have Marissa Marcotti.
Marissa, you're on.
M-A-R. Nope, and she's no longer with us.
Okay, let's go. Continue.
We have Tom Moshe.
Tom Moshe, you're on, Tom. Tom.
Looks like Tom is self-muted.
Mr. Moshe, is your microphone unmuted? Okay, our next person is Catherine Colorado.
Catherine Colorado, you're on.
Okay, Catherine is not available. We have Lisa Wilkins.
Lisa Wilkins, you're on.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. 2 minutes is just not enough because I have so many questions. You can't see it, but I have a page full of notes just on here. First of all, I want to say that schools in the Bay Area, including Contra Costa County, I have colleagues in Brentwood and in Antioch, they have committed to staying on distance learning until January, so until the end of this semester. So I think that that's really important to realize that they're just down the street from us. I also want to give you a quote from Dr. Angela Rasmussen, who's an associate research scientist at the Columbia University Nauman School of Public Health. This was from an interview she did on Science Friday. This is the quote. Well, teachers and parents should definitely not think that children are immune or more resistant to the virus. Just because they don't develop as severe of a disease, that doesn't mean that they can't be infected, and it doesn't mean that they can't bring the virus home with them to transmit to other people in their household. It also doesn't mean that they would be incapable of transmitting it to faculty and staff in schools. That is really important. Okay, a lot of our faculty, if you look at the ages, are in the age where they are susceptible. I just want to tell you, as far as PPE, I have been on my campus. We do not have adequate PPE. I have one bottle of cleaning solution and a roll of paper towels and 2 face masks. That's what I've been given for PPE, and have told that we don't have anything else. If you guys are distancing at home or in the office, it is so disrespectful to teachers, to students, to parents, that you cannot find yourself in a crowded place, but you expect us to be in a classroom with, I have 150 students. 150 students. An exposure is considered 15 minutes. I'll have them for at least 55 minutes a period. So that's 4 exposures times 150 students per day. Per day. Okay?
Time.
My reality.
Time.
I just can't believe that you're going to be cutting me off because I have so much more to say, but you have to think about this. I want my students.
Okay, next.
Okay, our next person is Rebecca Freeman.
Rebecca, you're on.
Okay, she's no longer with us. We
Next.
have Tammy Williams and
Tammy Williams, you're on.
Okay, I teach 3rd grade at John Muir, and I've been thinking a lot about the hybrid model. I'm really excited to get back to teaching my students in person, and I thought I was going to be able to teach the in-person kids and give the hands-on instruction they need in small groups. And then the distance learning would be the apps and the program that we've already got in place with our slides. But now it seems like I'm going to have to be on Zoom and teaching in person at the same time. And I don't, if some board members have to remove the mask to be heard with the microphone on, I don't know how I can teach in person with the mask on and they hear me on the Zoom, even with the microphone. That doesn't seem like the kids are going to get a quality education. It's going to be all garbled. So my concern is that if I have to do the distance learning kids, if they're doing the apps on the days they're not with me, and I'm teaching full hands-on instruction, because I just can't see that working. They're not going to be able to hear me, and I'm going to be stuck standing in one spot the whole day so that they can see me on the camera. So I'd appreciate you rethinking that plan. It sounds good until you think of all the technical issues that are already having, since so many people can't even get on to make comments. So I do appreciate the hybrid idea. I just think we have to tweak it a little bit better to make it more user-friendly and more kid-centered. Otherwise, kids aren't going to get what they need. They might as well stay at home and bid on Zoom all day. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Next.
Our next person is Maria Smith.
Maria, you're on.
Okay, Maria has her microphone muted, so we will go on to Michelle Orgon.
Michelle, you're on.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board. I must first tell you that I'm very outraged on a report item that members are limited to 2 minutes to speak. As Ms. Wilkins stated, there are many questions that we have, and this being the only time to comment 2 minutes is disrespectful in my opinion. First, let me start by asking the question through Mr. Nava to the district. Do we have safety plans completed for all 53 sites?
Mr. Khan, can you answer that question?
I don't have an up-to-date report, but we are substantially complete with color-coded maps and paths of travel. But I can't definitively say that every principal has submitted their safety plan.
Okay, it's been reported to me that school sites have not met again and finished their plans. As we have asked at the bargaining table for safety plans to look over and approve, they have not been brought forward at all of these times. And that is an effects on our working conditions. What I believe I hear you saying tonight is going full board with no social distancing in the classrooms at elementary. Is that understanding correct on the model being proposed to phase in? There would be no social distancing?
That's correct.
Okay. As we have learned about the changes in COVID and the changes in transmission and that it is air borne, if you could move to the slide on past the PPE on pending orders.
Time.
Mr. President, when this meeting was designed, I was understanding that we were going to have reports from all our bargaining groups. And to have the president of one of our unions be held to a 2-minute does not make any sense. And I think that we should have the representatives from each of our bargaining groups speak to the board and speak without a time limit and participate in this discussion. I don't know if I have 3 other votes with me, but I'm confused. That was my understanding.
Mr. Nava, members of the board, if that's something the board wants to consider, I would suggest treating each public speaker the same and not treating any individual different than any other, since this is public comment time on a report item.
Mr. Nava, I don't have a problem with this being a report item, and typically I understand trying to expedite meetings. However, this is not a public comment time where they're limited to 3 minutes with a 20-minute section. This is a report item. I prefer going longer than the 2 minutes. I don't think it's appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Porter?
I think we're being very disrespectful to our audience and to the community. This is a pandemic we're dealing with. Any feedback that we can get from them and their feelings would help with my decision making. I think limiting them to 2 minutes is, I'll be honest, insulting. So
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McFarland.
I think that since it is public comment, I think they should be able to speak their concerns and their issues. I do think when we get to the 3, 4, 5 minutes and we're chastising us, we also have emails that they can continue those types of comments if they have additional questions. But I do think that the public has a right to be heard.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland. Mr. Neely?
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Unlimited time, I don't agree with that. If you want to extend it a little bit, I understand that completely. Thank you.
Mr. Knaksack?
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Yeah, I think with our bargaining units, they probably should be able to make their comments. And the public is sure, but unlimited is a long time. I think the public probably deserves more than 2 minutes, but on the other hand, be mindful of their time also.
I have a dilemma. I started out with 2 minutes with a lot of speakers that probably did not want to speak at the beginning. I change it right now. Does there anybody have any problems with going 5 minutes? Any problems or unlimited time? Doesn't matter to me.
I
It's
think that's adequate. 5 minutes should be fine.
5 minutes, Mr. Neely? Mr. Knacksack?
5 minutes should be a max. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Farland?
I think 5 minutes is excessive if they can get their point across in 3, but I would say no more than 5.
Thank you, Ms. Porter.
I'll go along with the consensus, a minimum of 5 minutes.
Mr. Freitas?
Minimum.
You know, my part really is that our bargaining groups, our CSEA, our LEA, and our president, this were a regular meeting. We would have comments from bargaining groups, and they would be able to speak unlimited. And I don't understand, especially on a report item like this, where we're talking about input of the starting of school and bringing kids back, why these individuals are somehow limited to a time limit that they would not be imposed upon otherwise. I understand we're in a public comment, but we're not in the true public comment on non-agendized board items. So I still disagree with limiting our bargaining groups to 5 minutes. I don't think that's right.
I have to agree with Mr. Freitas. These people represent large groups of our employees and have a significant weight.
Yes, Mr. Beverly?
I agree with Mr. Freitas. This is a report item. That means it's a discussion item. I understand that the meeting could get long. I think that at some point we could maybe remind people about a time check, but I agree that this needs to be a discussion. This affects a lot of people, so I say we need to extend the time for sure.
All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to extend the time to 5 minutes limit. We have any union representatives, CSEA, LEA, LPPA, whatever it is, they have an unlimited time to express their wishes. Thank you. Michelle?
Mr. Nava, I
Yes.
would suggest then that since we've only heard from 2 members of the public, that we revisit those 2 if they would like to have a little bit more time.
Agreed.
Thank you. Michelle, you have unlimited time at this time, and we'll back up.
Thank you, President Nava.
Thank you, members of the board. I appreciate that and appreciate you understanding how impactful this is. Going to our safe school safety plans that are not developed, I am concerned with the amount of time to finish those safety plans as my members are on break currently, and many of our CSEA members have taken break during this time to come back with those plans and take a look at it. November 2nd seems awful close in order to start and make sure that those details are hashed out. I bring this up because of excuse me, the dog barking wants to get in. Our case response forms throughout our district. We have had some issues with them, and I understand that the person in charge of that has been overloaded, and that they are in charge of keeping track of those forms, who's been exposed, who's positive, who has possibly exposed others, and tracing that. Upon the 32 case reports that have been completed, we have many that are incomplete, that are, if we go to the district webpage and go to exposure protocols, they were not followed. I would call attention to a couple of forms. For example, Lodi High's 9/23 case report date. We have several people that were exposed several that were supposed to get tested from exposure, and yet we have no update on that. So we don't know, and, calling the person and going through these forms, if we're coming back on track and we're looking at forms that haven't been, all of the boxes are not marked. For example, with Lodi High, and we had exposure of person A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and a psychologist, and they are all awaiting results. We don't know if we had an outbreak at that school site because 2 did test positive. We were waiting for the 3rd. We still don't have an update on that. We have a situation that happened with a CSEA member being reassigned from transportation to a school site. They were assigned to the site. The notification said that there was no notification needed to the transportation department because they had not been there since August 30th. Yet they had been reassigned to an elementary school site. And because the employee didn't know who she came in contact, I say who he or she came in contact, the employee, and they're waiting on test results. So I don't know if we notified that elementary admin, if we got the test results back from the person from transportation, if they were in fact positive because they were symptomatic. And so the people that were in, if we go through our chart on our district webpage and we go through, you are living with a person, you are symptomatic, you are supposed to be quarantining. And yet we have people on these forms that are saying they got tested and they need to be isolated per doctor's recommendation. But we're not telling the rest of the staff that have been in contact if they're supposed to isolate. We have marked bubbles. Have they come in? Are they reporting exposure to a case? Unmarked. Is the person reporting symptoms? No. But on the box next to it, it says yes and gives a date. So the simplest parts of these forms are being posted to us, and there is not follow through. One form started out in transportation, and the first date was July 3rd. They had dry cough fever. They got a negative COVID test. On July 16th, the doctor reported that they had been exposed to a family member who tested positive. So at that point in time with someone you're living with, you're supposed to be in isolation with them, not exposing. Yet on this form, it says doctor now is quarantining patient from 9/16 to 9/25. I don't know if that's a typo, if they meant that should have been July, but it says they have not returned to work. So we have lots of mistakes on the forms. People who are feeling ill and telling to go to the doctor, and our form says you now quarantine for 14 days, but yet they're being told to come back a week later. So as we talk about a safety plan, our own safety plan and exposure model, I think we need to evaluate, are we keeping track? Can we keep track? Can we make sure that we're tracing individuals who are testing positive or coming into exposure? You know, an incident where a person who then tested positive came in contact with 2. They then became a positive. They were in with students testing, and that school site had to contact those students. So we need to make sure that we are tightening the ship, looking at this, and for someone to tell me, I don't have the time to go through these forms and make sure they're correct. Well, I think we need to go through and find out, do we need to train the people filling out the forms? Because if somebody reports that their mother had symptoms, but we don't know the date, and yet they were at a school site with symptoms and began quarantining the following date, we need to notify people. This is serious. And now that we are looking at going back, we need to make sure that we are ready to do contact tracing, that we are firming up our protocols for exposure. So with safety plans, I think the safety plan, the district safety plan and exposure protocol needs to be relooked at. What are we doing to follow up? How is that person, if that person, as Mr. Porter had referred to earlier tonight, we need to assign someone. If that's the case, we need to make sure those updates are done. Did they test positive? Do we need to make sure that they are going off and not coming onto a school site? Making sure that everyone got the exposure protocol. It's vitally important to keep us from shutting down schools as we move to bringing kids, all kids on campus. With moving on to the next question, I know that the high school sections, the digital sections were easy to set up, and that there was some changes at the beginning of the year for some high schools and making calls. Through President Nava, if we can ask how many elementary students signed up for all distance learning at the beginning of the year?
Mr. Scott, do you have that information?
I do not have that information at this time.
Sorry, Mr. Nava, members of the board, I do not have that information in front of me at this time.
So that might be helpful as we look forward as to, hybrid versus in-person all. We do believe that socially distancing is important, especially as we're learning more about the aerosol transmission. On the PPE, the slide that I began to speak about earlier, the slide after that talked about plexi shields and air purifiers. As we were at the bargaining table, we were told that plexi desk shields would only be purchased for group tables. Are we buying them for all students, or is this limited to 3 or 4 per classroom?
Mr. Khan, you have that information?
And it's also on the website. We have orders for 30,000 plexiglass desk shields.
Okay, so basically about every student. Thank you. And the portable air filter systems for all classrooms?
Also on the website, we have orders for Mr. Nava. We have orders for 3,000 units that will recycle 800 square feet of room air in 30 minutes. So in a little over 30 minutes, an entire classroom would be recycled through a HEPA 13 filter with ionization.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan, I don't know how many classrooms we have. Is it about 3,000?
No, it's about 1,500. So we think 3,000 will cover classrooms, all the office areas, and wherever else a site or a district office or facility would like to place them.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear, especially with the changes in how the transmission is that we're hearing. Mr. Neely talked about, how we talked months ago about one-way hallways and plans, taking stuff out of classrooms. Again, without having those safety plans, I think there needs to be time for teachers and staff to revisit this and revisit finishing those plans and getting those in so we can discuss it. If we are talking about reshuffling and classes possibly, dissolving, through Mr. Nava, if parents in elementary are going to want all distance learning, it's my understanding that you're looking at reshuffling. That means possibly displacing some teachers. Is that correct?
Dr. Washer?
Mr. Nava, members of the board, that was one way to handle the situation. That was not a definite that this is what we were doing. There were several options discussed.
Okay, so if you can clarify, if we go to all in person and we have parents who want to wait, as some of the high school parents signed up for a year long, some of our elementary signed up for a year long, are we going to give any options? Are we going to revisit this as I think it was Mr. Porter that talked about a parent survey possibly. Again, we're on a 2-week break, so that gives us only 1 week with everybody hopefully back in town to find out what the request is. I worry about that shorter time frame and wonder if that date should be pushed back in order for all bargaining and effects to take place, all site safety plans to be finished, turned in, and the protocols looking for exposure and cases to be looked at as to follow up on who's tested positive, how are we going to communicate with students as a district plan. I think looking at with this week being break and then only 2 weeks, that seems like a short time to get that done. I would also ask that in following up with somebody who's tested positive, and unfortunately on some of the case reports, they were not confidential. I know there is great dilemmas in how do you contact the person that could be testing positive. I know that the district safety committee did come up with a questionnaire that each person would kind of keep track of daily, making sure that they're asking those questions. Am I running a fever? Do I have any of those symptoms? So I don't know where that got dropped off, but as we go back to make sure and alleviate, as Mr. Porter pointed out, somebody doesn't have any sick days, they don't want to apply for leave, they come to work sick. If we have a reminder with them with that questionnaire that the safety committee developed, that might help remind them of the significance. The other is from these case response forms, it doesn't show anywhere whether or not they were directed to personnel to follow up with what possible leaves that they could be entitled to as per our exposure protocol that's posted. So I'd ask that we look at how is that communication going then across the district to another department, since it's a different department that is handling these responses to the person that needs to call personnel and say, is this, under the emergency leave, is this workman's comp? I think that's very important. My teachers have been complaining of not having the appropriate PPE, as you heard from one member. Hopefully we can develop in the safety plan exactly where they go to make sure that they have a mask, that they have gloves to wipe down the things in their classroom, that it's easily accessible to them. It is going to be important that we are working together. As this meeting started, teachers started saying, all I have is a spray bottle and paper towels. I don't have any more face masks. I don't have, and that should be an easy one to fix. And then the follow up with, should everyone on campus be wearing the masks when they're in a room working with other individuals? So I'd ask that we follow up with those reminders that when you're on campus, you need to do that. And if we're not following social distancing in classroom, that is a little concerning. I would hope that we would relook at those numbers very carefully for those classes, especially our AM and PM kindergarten classes where they overlap and you have 48 students for, I think some of them are 90 minutes in the classroom together. That exponentially increases their exposure rate. So in those safety plans, those teachers, I think would bring up those things, but they need to be finished. And that's where I think we need to start in finishing those before pushing to start this on the 2nd. I think there are pros and cons to the hybrid. I do believe that, as several mentioned, the $2 million, I'd rather see that in mitigation of cleaning than we already have the thermometers for taking temperatures. And I think most people can do that. So that $2 million, I think, in mitigating cleaning would be a better use. Thank you for extending the time this evening and hearing from the unit. Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mr. Nava, Mr. Neely here.
Yes, Mr. Neely.
Look, we got a couple of emails from some two people that were not able to unmute quick enough on the other, and I told them I would let you know.
Okay.
Their names.
Yes.
Are Tom, and I think it's Mocia, Moccia.
Okay.
And Maria Smith. Thank God she's got an easy last name to pronounce. There we go.
Okay. Very good.
They are online now and ready to speak.
They are? Okay. Yes. Let's start with Tom. Can we start with Tom? And what I'd like to do, Valerie, is go back to Lisa Wilkins and give her 5 minutes, and then go back to Tammy Williams and give her 5 minutes. Okay. All right. Let's. Tom, you're on.
Hello, board. Can you hear me now? Great. Thank you guys for coming back to me. I have a couple of questions that I'll let you ponder before I get into my other comments, and then maybe you can answer them at the end of my 5 minutes. First, on the report, I'd like to know why the difference of going back full-time between Valley Robotics and Independence is an option, why they're not held to the same plan as everyone else. Also, based on just tonight with public comments, I can see that distance learning and webinars are not ideal. I've sat in multiple students' classes. Okay, my daughter's at Elkhorn. They're all gate kids. They're gifted. Okay, and although they're doing well, the distance learning approach is far from working, even though we've tried our best. Okay. Also, we have more than 30 schools within the county that have gone back to full-time in-person learning because of waivers. So I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy of why there's even a question as to when we should be going back full-time. Now, I understand that the Lodi Unified School District is a lot bigger than individual schools that have gone back on waivers. And to Mr. Friedis's questions on how many school districts and schools nationwide have gone back to school, I do have some numbers from a college in Texas State University, who has exactly the number of students that we have in Lodi Unified. They have 30,000 students on campus, and their 7-day rolling average of infections is 4.9. So to give you an idea on what infection rates might be. Okay? And to another public comments point about lack of PPEs and lack of masks, anyone that goes anywhere in our community needs a mask on. So the fact that a teacher may not have a mask is a total cop-out. So now if they're looking for county provided masks, that's fine. Okay. Also, I'm wondering why on the report, there is not any data on infection rates of schools that have already opened in the county. I understand that getting opening from districts and other portions of the state or across the country are difficult, but to get that information from public health is not. So as a parent, I think parents in the district have been very patient, okay? But to hear members on public comment to start trying to push out going back to school even farther is ridiculous. What have we been doing since March? There's no reason that all this should not be ready. Now, I am in the mind that we should all go back to school right after they come back from break. But I would not be opposed to a phased-in approach. Okay? I understand there are complications. But in the end, with with comments from teachers unions and other affiliates, it's starting to become a political aspect and not a health and student issue. So based on that, I'd like to know the answers to the questions of, why is Valley Robotics and Independence being treated different from a smaller campus than, say, Elkhorn is?
Dr. Washer, could you answer that quick?
Mr. President, members of the board, Independence is predominantly a remote distance learning model. It always has been. They meet in very, very small groups and in sometimes individual students to check on students and give individual or very small group support. So it is a very different program than a regular classroom. So to have them go to their regular schedule isn't much different than an all distance learning model, since most of what they do is distance learning anyway. Coming back would simply be allowing the one-to-one with the teacher or the very small group that they have been doing before the pandemic. Valley Robotics has a combination of in-class and remote learning based on the individual needs of the student and parent choice. And so it is a very different model as well than a regular classroom setting. So that is why those two I proposed start earlier with their regular schedules, because especially with Independence, it isn't much different. And with Valley Robotics Academy, they certainly do accommodate a lot of remote learning as well, whereas the regular classroom does not.
Thank you. And finally, I don't know where I am on time, but I will wrap it up. I'm just curious as to, why the plans for a hybrid model hadn't been negotiated with the teachers union long ago. I don't know. It just seems like there's at least 30. That was the last time I counted. 30 schools that are all in-person learning throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Valerie, could we get Maria Smith, please?
Maria Smith?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hello, Dr. Washer, President Nava, and board members. Thank you for letting me come back in. My name is Maria Smith, and I'm a teacher at John Muir. I'm here tonight to voice a few concerns I have about your plan. A plan, I may add, that makes a change in our work environment and therefore needs to be negotiated in good faith with Leah, not just shoved down our throats. Concern number 1, when talking about the PPE, several items, including plastic desk shields, portable air filter systems for each classroom, and hand sanitizer devices for each school bus have been ordered but not received. When will they be received? How can we have a plan to go back to campus with these items not already in place? Concern 2, the plan says that the district has posted for additional custodial services for school sites and is allocating additional funds for custodial time. Have these positions been filled? Have the extra hours been picked up by existing staff? If the answer is no, how can we go back to campus without this extra support? Concern 3, what about staff who have or live with someone who has medical issues that might make them high risk if they are exposed to COVID-19? In your meetings back in August, there was talk that those teachers with a doctor's note being able to do distance learning all year. In this new plan, there's no mention of these staff members. Are they just out of luck? Will they just need to file for the Families First Coronavirus Response Act? Have you thought about how many positions you would need to fill? I know I would be one of them. My final concern, do you have a date that you will be returning to in-person board meetings that are open to all who would like to attend them? If not, how can you give us a date to go back into a classroom to teach in a room with 10 students while masked, while teaching 20 other students who are doing distance learning all at the same time, while troubleshooting connection issues, student questions, and checking for understanding? Please, until there is a negotiated plan, until there are PPE items at all sites set up and ready to use, until there is enough custodial services at all sites, until you open your doors and hold in-person meetings where all are welcome, please let us continue to do full distance learning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maria. Valerie, do we have Lisa Wilkins available?
Lisa Wilkins?
Yes. I know she spoke for 2 minutes and I want to give her some time.
I am here.
Okay. Lisa, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So what I really wanted to say, I'm a science teacher. So what is the science behind going back to in-person instruction? Why is only full in-person instruction only being discussed? What about the hybrid model? I've heard a little bit about it, but if we're going to go back and we're going to go back safely, I think we need to start small. I think we need to go back in a hybrid model, but I want to see the science because we haven't seen the science about it. What is the protocol for substitutes? During distance learning, Dr. Washer and her cabinet pushed it down to the sites. If we go back, there is going to be a need for substitutes. What is going to be the district's protocol for that? What is going to be our, we don't have anything. Dr. Washer just admitted that the PPE and the procedures are not in place. They're not there now. I will tell you, I know it's on my campus. I haven't been there much, but I have been there. And when I've been there, my room was not clean. The one day I did come back, it was full of ants. It hadn't been cleaned since I don't know when. I had filled out a form every day saying that, no, I was working from home. But the day I came in and needed to work from campus, and it was miserable. Let me just tell you, it was not a comfortable teaching situation. It wasn't like I had someplace else to go. So I had to teach while I had ants crawling not only over me and the desk I was working on, but through my computer. It was not pretty. So if they're not cleaning now to accommodate the teachers that are working on site, what's going to happen when all of us are on site? How is this going to be done? I know you have positions open, but we don't have them filled. So those are all the problems that I have. But I do want to know what the science is. We need to look at what's going on in other districts. Look at what happened in New York. They were open for 4 weeks and and parts of New York had to shut back down because of infection rates. Until we have protocols in place, until we have the backing of the school board and administrators for handling people who, students and parents who refuse to come on or are coming on campus refusing to wear masks, until that is done, this can't be, I don't see us going back to school. And I just want to make sure, I want to go back, believe me, I want to go back, but I want to make sure that we do this right and we do it safely, and that we've got all of our ducks in a row first. So that is really kind of what I wanted to say, is I want to make sure that we've got everything in place and we're doing this right and we're doing it slowly. And we have a methodology to doing this. So thank you for the additional time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Valerie, do you have Tammy Williams available?
Tammy Williams, are you there? Tammy Williams.
Oh, am I unmuted now? Thank you. I just want to thank you for letting me finish my thoughts. I really do like the hybrid plan the best. I think, as Lisa said, we need to phase in slowly and see what the COVID numbers look like when we have just half a class or a third of the class in place, as opposed to rushing to put everybody in together. I've already set up my classroom for this scenario for a hybrid, and I cannot space 24 kids 6 feet apart. And I know the kids are going to end up pulling their masks off. They have to sneeze. I've got third graders. I'm sure that's going to happen. The other thing I wanted to reiterate was the reason I want to give my in-person instruction my 100% full-time attention, as opposed to trying to Zoom and teach in class at the same time, is because I want to do hands-on learning. I want to do guided reading groups. I want to do hands-on math. I want to do science experiments, and I want to do social studies projects. And I don't want kids in a Zoom screen, the Brady Bunch screen, watching me do a science experiment. I want to, when they come back on the B days, the Thursday, Friday, I want to just reteach the lesson with the hands-on, and I'll be able to have time on Wednesday to clean whatever we were using. We didn't get to do magnets. They had to watch a video about magnets. I want to be able to do that with them, but I don't want the kids at home to have to watch a demonstration. So I don't want to be Zooming and doing that at the same time. And the other thing is, I'm thinking with $2 million of CARES money, if we're not going to use them on thermometers because those have already been bought, can't we use that money to hire custodians, so that more custodians, so there would be deep cleaning in my classroom on the Wednesdays between? I just think that $2 million could really definitely be used for custodial services. And there are people out of work, so it shouldn't be hard to find people to fill these positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Now, Valerie, do we have any employee group representatives? Let's put Deborah on, please.
Deborah Ladwig, are you available? She's not on the list anymore.
Not on the list. Okay. Any other employee representatives?
Not that I can identify.
All right. Let's continue with the audience. Who's next?
Rebecca Freeman.
Rebecca Freeman. She's on now.
Rebecca.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Washer, President Nava, and members of the board. I'm a high school teacher, and I've been with the district for 16 years. I have a few points I would like to speak to regarding the pandemic, distance learning, and the reopening of schools. I can tell you there's a large group of teachers that are ready, willing, and able to go back to school now, and we have been wanting to go back to school for a very long time. I know this because every time I post in favor of this on Facebook, I have several people that message me telling me that they agree with me, but they are too afraid to speak up. There has been a group of very vocal teachers that appear to speak on behalf of all of us, but I can tell you that's not the case. While I respect their point of view, they don't speak for me and a number of other teachers that have contacted me. While we want everybody to be safe and healthy and taking the necessary precautions, we are not afraid to return to the classroom, contrary to what you often hear. I teach hands-on curriculum in my classes, which includes industry certifications for my students. Distance learning has made that extremely challenging, as you can imagine. How are we supposed to make students college and career ready if we cannot even get them into a hands-on learning environment? For just a moment, please think about the learning that takes place in classes such as horticulture, floral design, wood shop, auto shop, fashion, foods, and ag mechanics, and many of the other hands-on courses. Most of you have been to the Tokay Ag program and have seen firsthand the type of industry-based learning that happens. But the most important reason we need to return to the classroom as soon as possible is for our students and teachers' mental health. I've had numerous conversations with my students on the impact it has had on their emotional well-being, and I even see it with my own children at home. I'm extremely worried about the long-term effects that distance learning is having on all of us. Please get us back into the classroom as soon as possible and not in a hybrid situation. Another issue that I would like to bring up is the spending of the CARES Act funding. We've been fortunate enough to be able to spend some of that money on supplies for our students so they can participate in hands-on activities through distance learning. A huge drawback to the setup for this funding is a very lengthy approval process at the district. It seems that purchase orders and requisitions have to go through so many people that it takes way too long to actually receive the product and get it into students' hands. The purpose of this money now. Something needs to be done with the process in order to expedite getting the supplies into our students' hands. The fact that this funding must be spent by December 31st worries me with all of the delays in the approval process. These delays make it extremely difficult to plan curriculum. If we have no idea when we will get the supplies, how can we plan what to teach? On a somewhat related note, can you please help me understand why all of the product deliveries are now being made to the warehouse or mailroom rather than the school site, as has been done in the past? This just further delays the product getting to students. I could see this being the case when campuses were largely vacant last spring. There's the staff that are now to accept deliveries. I even had a situation where perishable flowers, which are shipped in boxes, were delivered to the mailroom, and they were not going to deliver them to me at the school until the next day. Keeping in mind, I had students scheduled to pick up flowers that afternoon. Have you seen what happens to flowers when they sit in a non-refrigerated warehouse in a box? Luckily, the fine folks at the mailroom felt so bad they made time to deliver them to me that day. So again, please help me understand why this process has been put into place. It seems very controlling to me. If the reason is to make sure items are inventoried and correct, I can assure you the process is flawed, as wrong items have been labeled for me coming from the mailroom. If items are delivered to the school site, as they always have been, the secretaries know who is at their school and can make sure the items are delivered to that teacher in a much more timely manner. Finally, the last item I would like to bring up is the unequal access to students being on campus. I'm an FFA advisor and in charge of the FFA officer team, which consists of 7 amazing students who are elected each year. These students plan all the FFA activities, which of course are virtual for now, for the over 350 FFA members at Tokay. It seems that it is okay for football to hold, quote, conditioning, but I'm not allowed to meet with the 7 FFA officers, socially distanced, outside, and of course with masks on. I see this as another example of athletics getting preferential treatment. While I love high school sports as much as the next person, I'm extremely upset and fed up with the unequal treatment. I've had several of the FFA officer parents contact me saying it is not fair, and all I can say is that my hands are tied. So again, please help me to understand why some groups can get together and some cannot. Lastly, I strongly disagree with high schools waiting until the new semester to return to the classroom. If we can go to Walmart and fly on an airplane, we can go back to the classroom.
Time.
Why are high school students getting the short end of the stick? I'm just about done. By returning much later than the rest. I understand the scheduling issues, but that is minor in the grand scheme of things. I appreciate the mention from Mr. Neely and Mr. Heberly on the benefits of CTE and ag, and surely you can realize how much learning happens in those 4 weeks that we could potentially not be at school. We need to get back ASAP. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next, Valerie.
Next person is Gracie Razzo.
Gracie, you're on.
Not here. She's no longer here. So the next person is Brenda De La Torre.
Brenda De La Torre. Brenda, you're on.
Hello, thank you for taking my comments. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Freeman for what she said. Before that, anyone who spoke about PPE, you spoke about contracts, and you spoke about negotiations. Not one person who spoke up tonight spoke about our students, their mental health, and their physical health, and what this has done to them. I'd like to go on to read what I had written down because I'm going to get upset. Hello, I have 2 children enrolled in your district. One is in high school and one is in 8th grade. The last 8 months of their schooling has been nothing short of miserable for them. Honestly, I don't blame their outlook on it. There have been many days where my 9th grader's class is scheduled only to last a maximum of 3 minutes, given an assignment and sent on his way. What kind of an education is that? And how is it fair to my student? We as a family are choosing not to live in fear, and we are being forced to stay secluded day in and day out. Parents have had to leave their jobs to help their children on a computer with Zooms, multiple applications that they are not understanding. Most teachers have stated that they would love to go back, but I understand there is a large number of teachers who do not. I know I speak for the large majority of parents when I say let our children go back. For the parents who want their children to remain in distance learning, have the teachers who have underlying conditions teach those students. As the California doctor has already stated, there has been no uptick in cases related to school openings. Also, our numbers in the county continue to decline. So what now? Are you going to continue to force our children to live in fear because you are in fear yourselves? Let our children receive an actual education that our tax dollars are paying for. I sent multiple emails to board members, superintendents, asking for answers, yet only 2 board members reached out to me, 1 today and 2 prior. I would like to thank them for their time, and I hope the rest of you were creating a plan for my child's return, and you simply could not be bothered to answer my questions. Now I'd like to break down some stats for you. Our current average daily rate of new cases is 49.28. That's in the last 2 weeks average. And if you look on the public health website, the group 0 to 17 years old, their percentage is only 9.7% of that 49. Also, for ICU bed COVID patients is 9% out of all ICU cases in our county. Hospitalizations is at 5% of all hospitalizations. So for the teachers union concerned with our children being super spreaders and transmitters of this disease, that's irrelevant. I urge the board and the superintendent and the unions to come to an agreement so that our children can come to school. I urge the teachers union to do what's best and what's right for our children. I know people have differing views and opinions during this time, but we can all agree that our children should come first, because if they don't come first, what kind of example are we setting for them? And what kind of a future do we have if we're not putting them first? Because they are in fact the future of this country. I hope we can lead by example and show our children that even with differing opinions, we can do what's best for the majority, and for the majority of us, that is to go back to school. I'd like to thank you for your time. I do have a couple questions. We've talked long and hard about the forms and positive cases the teachers are concerned with, but no one has hit on our children's grades, testings, learning loss. Are we tracking any of that? Are we concerned with any of that during distance learning?
Dr. Washer, can you answer that, please?
Mr. President, members of the board, absolutely, we are concerned about that. That is one of the reasons why we are bringing you recommendations to have students back in class, in-person instruction. We know that there are challenges with many students on distance learning. So yes, absolutely, we are concerned about learning loss and plans for mitigation. Yes.
Thank you,
Okay,
Dr.
and okay, sorry to cut you off. The California has allocated $25 million in the CARE Act for our district to use for PPE reopening and everything like that. I know we don't want to spend the $2 million on new thermometers. How is that money being allocated, and what is left of that $25 million to be spent by December 31st? Do we have that number?
Mr. Khan, do you have an answer to that, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Nava, members of the board, Dr. Washer. Actually, we've been allocated between the three resources, roughly 36 million, 12 million of it is more long-term than the 24 million, which I think this speaker is alluding to. That 24 million must be spent by December 31. The state right now is grappling with creating an audit book for that money. So guidance is actually changing. To answer it as quickly as possible, by the time all of our requisitions are in, we'll have between 5 million and 7 million in PPE orders. Now, the money allocated to teachers to buy things for instruction is not the December money. We did not feel that gave the teachers enough time to adequately research and buy. So I'm not referring to any of that money at all. They've got some of the longer term money. We were planning and still might apply the bulk of this December money against a prorated cost for providing an extended school day. At one point, we did have County Office of Ed, the board's AB 1200 oversight, sort of a stamp of approval for doing that. But as the audit guide discussion progresses, guidance has changed and the county is no longer offering that stamp of approval. Now, whether or not it will work as an expenditure, we don't know. We have clear language in the initial documentation that came with the funding that said we can use it for an extended school day. Now there's language that says you can't use it for anything that was previously budgeted. So honestly, I don't know, but short, 5 to 7 million has been spent or encumbered, and we're hoping that we can use whatever remains from that short-term money against the prorated cost of the extended school day.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
Time.
Brenda, your time is up.
Okay, our next person is Jessica Hillscotter.
You're on, Jessica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Washer, President Nava, and board members. I am asking you tonight to open Lodi schools K through 12, Monday through Friday, full days. We are now in tier red and our kids have suffered enough. Watching my kids and other kids struggle every day has been something I never want to go through again. My younger child got his first quarter of grades and he got all 2s. He has never gotten a 2. And during his teacher conference, his teacher even said to me, I know most of the kids wouldn't be getting these grades if they were actually at school and in a classroom setting. We tried distant learning and it has failed the elementary school kids. Yes, the teachers have beautiful thought out slides and presentations, but that's not how kids learn. We have so many schools such as Linden, Ripon, and I believe Manteca who are already going back. Why can't Lodi do that? States all around us have their kids back. It looks like most democratic states are staying closed. And why are the teachers union acting like they aren't essential employees? I'm very confused. Are these teachers not going to the store? Are they not leaving their house? Teacher unions just keep wanting to push it back and back. Us parents are tired of it. Walmart, Costco, restaurant workers, they don't get a choice. All they talk about is negotiating. Us parents can see it's all about the contract. Where are the talks about the kids and what they're going through? Nobody's talking about the kids. And that is what is most upsetting tonight. This isn't about you. If you don't like it, please find another job. Maybe one of the Costco workers will be willing to take the job for you. Please stop this madness before you really make them regress educationally more than they already have. Listening tonight seems like there are too many options and making things more difficult than they need to be. Doing the hybrid model makes no sense. If parents are going to let their kids go back, they should go back full days, 5 days a week. This has been going on since before spring break. There should be no reason our schools are not ready for full days. Please remember, families can't be taking and picking up their kids and having some kids not home that need to be watching their siblings, such as a middle school watching an elementary school brother. Your decisions tonight impact real families, and please just allow all grades to go back and not split everything up. That would make families' lives a lot harder, especially when both parents work full time. Also, parents are watching who's voting for what tonight. Knowing elections are coming up, just know we will never stop standing up for our children and their education. And please also know any email that a parent sends that may not be very nice is because we are frustrated and we want what's best for our children, and it is nothing personal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Valerie?
Okay, our next person is Nicole Champeau.
Nicole, you're on.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, members of the board. I understand that you have a lot of pressure and that this decision is incredibly difficult. And I'm sure you're all doing your own research to add checks and balances to this increasingly politicized virus, but I'm concerned that in some cases you may not have all of the correct information. Hybrid education means that teachers will be split and everybody's learning is going to suffer. Also, school sites do not all have adequate PPE, cleaning supplies, and staff to do the cleaning. Teachers already do too much and get paid too little. We can't expect them to also be responsible for doing temp checks and cleaning when, if it's not done up to a certain standard, the consequences will be, can be dire. Some of you were quoted as saying that there needs to be a full digital option for students and families. However, noticeably, this does not include the same humanity for teachers, but recently students from at least some schools, again, mostly secondary, were called by counselors and told the families that a full digital option is not possible and would not be offered. Students will be forced to be on campus for at least a couple periods a day. If families do not like it, they can feel free to withdraw their students from their schools and place them at independence. You have also been advertised during these meetings that particular program is a fix-all solution. Many schools who have opened have had some number of cases or even deaths. And this was before we head into winter. And the cold and flu season, the respiratory illness season is coming. There's a secondary school in Modesto that has already had to close this week because of cases. As for the rumor that kids don't spread COVID, this is not even close to the whole picture. U.S. schools have no national protocol for reporting cases, so we don't even know what the numbers really are. And according to the CDC, infection is about half as likely in children under 11 as it is 11 to 18, but these numbers are always subject to change. It also highlights the fact that children do get it, and children in middle school and high school are twice as likely to get it. That's a lot of kids in this district. Dr. Galley has been widely quoted by news sources that school attendance has not increased the spread of COVID, but if you watch the interview where that quote came from, he warns that this is only based on preliminary numbers and that is subject to change. Smaller private schools in California have reported outbreaks since even then. With all due respect, in this meeting where some of you are distant, if large group gatherings are not allowed, if businesses are not allowed to open, it is not conscionable to force thousands of students, staff, and teachers to be in small confined areas as we head into winter. In short, nobody should be forced to be among large groups of people at this time. Parents, staff, students, and teachers should all have a choice. If you cannot truly provide them with a choice because of money constraints, then how can you in good conscience force everyone to be on campus with no feasible recourse? If you think there are financial concerns now, what happens when the first serious illness or death occurs that could have been prevented and the family that was supposedly important of the student, staff, or teacher sues because they were not enough actual precautions were taken because of a financially and politically motivated yet premature decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Valerie?
Our next person is Claudia Rodriguez Orozco.
Claudia, you're on.
No. Okay, she's no longer with us. Kimberly Freeberg.
Kimberly, you're on.
President Nava, members of the board, and Superintendent Washer, as an elementary teacher, the hybrid model you presented in the MOU and here tonight still has us teaching all students at the same time while we have students in the classroom. I'm still going to be tied to a computer. Some students will be in the room, but on their computers. How is that any better than distance learning? At least if I can use it to work with that group exclusively and have the other group working independently. What's the plan for pickup and drop off? How will that work? What about lunchtime? When do we get a break if we truly can't have recess or our preps? When will the desk shields be in hand or installed? Would students be required to wear masks? Do we have protocols for exposure when a teacher has to quarantine? Do we even have enough subs? I want to return to normal as much as everybody else, but I'm concerned for my health and the health of my students and families. I would like the board and the district to take a cautious approach. Will there be contact tracing? What about the busing situation? From the beginning of the year, I have had an AB roster, and then it was changed to a 3 roster with distance learning. I lost all of the student work for all of my distance learning students the week of grading. A teacher from each grade level should have been assigned the distance learning at the beginning of the year. Now we're talking about a possible shuffle. We've had our students, we've been working with them, we've connected with them. Now there's a risk that they could be pulled from us. Remember to listen and take your employees' opinions into account. Plus, these meetings are still remote for the audience. I'd like to ask that we be given some time to prepare our rooms for a return as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Valerie?
Our next person is Cindy Bondini. Cindy Bonini.
Bonini, you're on, Cindy.
C-Y-N. Okay. Samantha Stewart.
Samantha, you're on.
Okay. No Samantha. We have Jose Ordinola.
Jose Ordinella, you're on.
Nope, no. Nancy Villarreal.
Nancy Villarreal.
Nope. Okay. We have Jen Dietrich.
Jan Dietrich. Jan, you're on.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi. I'm a parent, and I really appreciate Mr. Porter's comments and questions this evening. Thank you. I'd like to focus my comments on the distance learning option because it was pretty much left out of the superintendent's presentation tonight. My family is at a higher risk of having a terrible outcome if we contract COVID, and that's why we originally signed up for the distance learning option. I have not been contacted by my school or the district to confirm my choice of distance learning going forward. I really beg you to resurvey families All of our lives have changed dramatically over the last 7 months. And, people are in different places and you are providing very different information than what was given to folks when you originally asked. If the district had explained that the district learning option wouldn't be taught by Lodi Unified teachers, I don't think I would have taken it. And it asks a larger question of how are you providing an equitable education option for all students in the district if the district's teachers aren't teaching a good percentage of kids that are going to be on that distance learning option. And when you look at equity, we know that, and the state's equity metric with county reopenings confirms that, low income, Black, Latino, Pacific Islander families, and many others are disproportionately impacted by COVID in terms of higher rates of infection, hospitalizations, and deaths. This distance learning plan doesn't sound like an equitable education for all students, or really a fair choice for families that are at higher risk. I'd also like to point out that, I am disappointed with the number and potential impact of the unanswered questions tonight. The district had months to come up with a plan for reopening. Thinking about some of the questions, school sites haven't submitted all their safety plans yet. Shouldn't a family get a chance to review what my school is going to do to ensure safety before I sign my kid up to go back to school? I don't know how safety measures like masks are going to be enforced. Questions about contact tracing and when and how the school community and parents will be notified. And also, yeah, I'm so glad to hear that PPE has been ordered, but when does that arrive? And the last thing I'd just like to say tonight is that, I am a little surprised by the number of parents who've said that they are speaking for most or all of parents out there. But, my child's in first grade, and I just want to share that her teacher has worked tirelessly to build a little virtual community for her class to keep kids engaged and learning. And she's done an amazing job with unprecedented levels of challenges. And my daughter loves her teacher and her classmates. I'm in support of a hybrid schedule and a phased-in return to school if we have the proper planning, implementation, and clear communication with families. I really hope we do not rush to meet an artificial deadline. Please take the time to get kids back to school in the safest way and ensure equity for the students who want to remain on distance learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan. Valerie?
Our next person is Liz.
What's Liz's last name?
She did not submit a last name. No. Okay. We have Alma Ruiz.
Alma Ruiz. Alma, you're on.
Okay, she's no longer here. We have Victoria Bautista.
Victoria, you're on.
Nope, she's no longer here. We have Jenny Miller.
Jenny Miller, you're on.
Jenny Miller, are you there?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good, okay. Hi. Sorry, I must have had my finger
We
on
can barely hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Not quite.
How about now?
Still soft. A little louder, please.
Hold on, I'm fixing my audio. Okay, is that any better?
Not any better.
Do you want to come back to me?
We can come back to you, Valerie.
Our next person would be Brandy De Alba.
Randy De Alva.
I'm muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. My name is Brandy De Alva, and I am a proud parent of 5 children in Lodi Unified School District. And I am so done with distance learning, trying to hold down a job and have 5 children, though their teachers are absolutely amazing and doing their best. I'm done with distance learning. I want my kids to be back at school, but I won't send them. In this meeting, you have not instilled confidence in me that a plan has been laid out to safely take care of my children on our LAUSD campuses. Now, I get this. You are not responsible for my children's mental health. You are not responsible for covering my work schedule. And you are not responsible for daycare for my children. That is my responsibility. But what you are responsible for is my child's education, an education that is given in a safe manner. I have a series of questions and maybe some suggestions for you to think about. I was given a survey at the beginning of the summer when this pandemic was full blown, and I'm like, absolutely, I want my kids home. I want distance learning. But what flexibility are parents given now? Will they be allowed to have their students return if schools do open? Will I be allowed to wait? We're going into cold and flu season. I'm seriously concerned because I have 2 children who are asthmatic, of what this is going to look like in-person learning safely for them going into the flu season. To me, it thinks we should wait, see how this plays out going into the winter, and then possibly moving an opening date to January. I understand there's a rush to open. If you open now, you can stay open. But this isn't a competition. We don't need to be the first district of our side to open. We just need to be safe. I'd rather be number one in safety and care of our children. I want to know how it's been laid out if I'm exposed. So let's say I'm exposed through another family member, through my job. My children are now exposed. Do I report that to the school? Does the school report that to the teacher? Is that being reported to the other kids in the class? What are the procedures and policies? Have that been laid out? Am I supposed to wait 7 to 11 days? Do I keep my kids home? What is CWA going to look like on this? I have 5 kids. One gets exposed at the school, and you asked me to quarantine my 1 kid for 7 to 11 days. I now have to quarantine my other 4 kids as well. Where are they going to get their education then for those 7 to 11 days if I have them in person? Now they're home with me. Who's going to pick up that job? I don't think it's going to be a sub. Do your subs have .org accounts? Do they have access to all the teachers' Google Classrooms? Do they have educational rights, admin for iReady or the other programs that the teachers use? So my child or my children are going to be going back and forth possibly to being home with me, to going to school. What is that going to look like for my job? I don't even want to talk to my boss about that. That leads me into a concern with the teachers. So what are the teachers exposed? I'm really concerned about the story that was shared at the beginning of this meeting about a professional who went on campus and did not share the information that they were exposed. They were trying to do their job. How are we supporting the teachers on this? Do they have sick days that they will be covered in this? If they have to quarantine, let's say they're exposed outside of the school and they cannot come to work, you don't want them to be there. Who's going to now take over my child's education? What's going to happen with that teacher? Will they be docked pay? What are the repercussions for the teacher on that? Because I'll be honest, if it means 7 to 11 days every time I'm exposed, whether it's at school or away from school, I can't afford that. And I would be tempted to be hush hush about it and try to go to work because I don't want to lose my pay. It'd be difficult that way. And again, that leads us right back into if that teacher's gone, who's going to take over my child's education? I'm concerned about the safety protocols, and I don't think that everything has been thought through at the school site. It seems to me in the reports that I'm getting from the different teacher unions and from yourself as well, not everyone is sure about the forms that are used, the procedures that are used, pickup, drop-off time. It's just not clear for us to return 2 weeks from today to expect teachers, my children, the parents, everyone to be trained on how to safely return in less than 2 weeks from today. I don't think we need to race for that. Reopening again needs to be done safely. We will never know if we over-prepared or overreacted, but it will be very clear if we underreact in the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
We have Jenny Miller.
Jenny, back. You're on, Jenny.
Not there. Okay, she has left us, so we will go on to Derwin Logan.
Derwin, you're on.
He's not on. We will go on to Jessalee Gehring.
Jessalee Gehring.
She's not there. Okay, and she has also left us. We have now Valerie Lear.
Valerie Lear.
Valerie, go ahead, please. Valerie Lear. Okay, she is on, but she's not talking. And I have no other commenters on my list. Oh. Oh, you have a statement to read.
Mr. Nava, members of the board, a member of the public submitted a statement for me to read who is not able to join us. This is from Valerie Panino. I am a LUSD parent to an elementary and middle school aged children. I am currently on the East Coast traveling for the fall break with my family. Due to our hotel accommodations and the time difference of the special board meeting, I would not be able to log in and comment as I would like. I'd appreciate if the following could be, I'm assuming, read. COVID has been a long and enduring process for us all, but we must continue to push forward to regain the basic needs of our children being in school. I'm fortunate to be able to work from home and stay home with my children while they distance learn, but my heart breaks for the families in our schools who are struggling to keep up with all the daily demands. My children do the work they are assigned, and their teachers have been doing a wonderful job engaging them as best as possible, but there's so much enrichment that can only happen in the classroom that our kids are missing out on. My 8th grade son missed out on an in-class history setup his teacher had to share in pictures rather than personally experience it alongside his peers, and this is just one example of many. Our kids are begging to go back to school, begging for parents to switch them to local private schools so they can go back to school. Parents and the majority of our LUSD, in capital letters, teachers agree that distance learning isn't working. It isn't providing the quality education our schools are known for. Our teachers' voices, the majority, the ones who want to be in class, are being drowned out in fear of losing their jobs. Online petitions have been signed by countless teachers and parents, and comments have been shared in regards to distance learning not working. I urge you, with the never-ending shift in the targets for reopening, take a stand and get our kids back in school. Our local private schools are learning in person at full capacity. We need to be too. Please make accommodations for the teachers who have real documented medical issues that would prevent them from being in class, just as you have given families the option of resuming distance learning in lieu of in-person learning. Returning to school will present new challenges, but together with your help with a solid plan backed by teachers and staff, we can safely be in school. All our students, not just elementary, but middle and high school as well. Thank you for your time, Valerie Panino.
Thank you, Dr. Washer.
Mr. Nava?
Yes.
Mr. Nava, Mr. Neely, can I make a comment here? We had an email today from one of the people who was on the schedule to talk that didn't come through, Cindy Bonini. And she sent a rather lengthy email.
That's
And
Cindy.
I'm not going to read the whole thing.
She's
What's
actually
that?
back on the she's actually back on the line right now.
Back on the
Yes,
line.
okay.
Okay, could you put her on, Valerie?
Cindy Bonini.
You're on? Cindy?
Her microphone is unmuted. Cindy, are you there? Okay, shows that she's there and her microphone is unmuted. I do have one more comment.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hi, okay, this is Cindy Bonini. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Good evening, President Nava, members of the board, Superintendent Washer, and members of the community. My name is Cindy Bonini, and I'm a kindergarten teacher at Lockford Elementary School. I've taught in this district for 22 years. I have listened to most board meetings since the COVID-19 shutdown of our schools. I have been patient and listened as teachers called in continually to try to convince us all that schools should remain closed due to fear of virus spread, or until a union contract is settled, or until all schools have proper PPE, which I want to tell you Lockford School does. Not many teachers have spoken out, if any, on why schools need to open now. It's been a half a year since I've had students in my classroom. Half a year. I cry every day. How can this be okay? Our children are being held hostage to our governor, our school board, and our teachers' union. They are helpless victims in this mess that is reality, continuing to suffer emotionally, socially, mentally, and academically. The price these kids are paying every day they are denied entry into our schools to learn in a matter that most need. This will cost us for years to come. This cost is far scarier to me than any risk of infection from COVID-19. Data is showing that our schools have opened and COVID cases are not spiking. Science is showing children 0 to 17 aren't transmitting the virus to others. And teachers who are fearful can definitely take control over adult interaction on campus, as they have been during distance learning. It's time to open our school gates and classroom doors. Kids are the ones paying the price, and it's absolutely ludicrous at this point. They are the reason our district exists. They are the reason teachers have jobs. Kids shouldn't be the ones stuck in the middle, suffering due to government overreach, union squabbles, and fear. Please, please help me get back into my classroom and do what I do best. Build well-rounded, confident, successful students ready to conquer the world. Thank you so much to everybody out there that is trying to ensure a safe reopening of our schools. I truly appreciate all of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cindy.
I have two more commenters.
Two more comments, Valerie. Put them on.
I have Valerie Lear.
Valerie Lear. Valerie, you're on?
Yes, hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Valerie Lear. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to give you a window, a look into our lives since COVID. I've been a parent and a foster parent for 26 years of special needs children. I have had 30 plus special needs students in and out of Lodi Unified School District in the 26 years we've been foster parents. We've had them from severe SDCs to mild mod middle schools. And currently I have a child at Tokay High who is deaf, one at Victor School in Autistic Level 2 program, one in a mild mod class at Murata Middle School, and one at Washington School in a severe SDC. I'm here tonight to give you this little window into our lives since the closure. Nate, a 15-year-old deaf child, his developmental delays are significant because of drug exposure. He lives for school. He always has. He's grown up using an interpreter for communication since he was in kindergarten.
He's learned to tell time, use money, sign to his interpreter, and all of that was taken away due to the closure. His language and interaction has been zero with distance learning. I can't even tell you, on a good day, we get an hour max, and that's if there's an interpreter available for him online. He has regressed so significantly that he's showing signs of depression. He's showing signs with maladaptive behaviors, all because of the lack of support that we used to depend on through Lodi Unified. Allie, my 6-year-old, has severe autism. She's been in a level 2 autistic class and splits off for ABA learning. She is just starting to speak when the shutdown happened. We would literally have to go to great lengths to get her to sit in front of a computer with tiles moving constantly to get her to do any kind of distance learning. So if you can imagine what this is, how this COVID has been affecting normal developing children through distance learning, can you even imagine the struggle that we have with our children trying to do this now? Someone with ADD watching the tiles move around and can't pay attention to whether or not 2 + 2 actually equals 4. Disabled children it's hard even just to, on a good day, get them to pay attention. On the bad days, it's all tantrums. I want to support this district. I want to support the teachers and the board, but you need to know that the suffering out in the special needs community is real. We're having real regression at a time when we should be seeing the results of all of the resources that have been put in place for these kids with special needs since early start, but we're not. We're seeing maladaptive behaviors. We're seeing crying and screaming. Our special needs kids are being so underserved by distance learning that it's, in my mind, almost a crime. The teachers that are putting themselves before the needs of these kids should be ashamed of themselves. We all know that the contract right now looks more important than our kids. Thank you. And for, just so I'm clear, I am definitely an advocate for full-time distance learning, at the very least for our special needs kids that are not immune suppressed and that can go back safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Valerie.
We have Jessa Lee Gehring.
Okay. Ms. Gehring, Jessa Lee. Are you on?
Okay, she's self-muted. So that ends our comments.
Thank you. I would like to take about a 5-minute break and come back fresh and ready to go. Don't disconnect your outfit and your things, okay? 5-minute break. Okay, the meeting is back in session. Now it's the board time to make a decision or take as much time as you want to, and whatever you need to say. We want to make sure that we make the right things or do the right thing, whatever it is, and nobody knows what the right thing is, but we'll start out with Mr. Heberly today.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Nava. I have 12 pages of notes. Wow, dead crowd here. All right, here we go. I did have kind of some bullet points that I wanted to kind of put on the table here for us to think about. You know, I always operate under the belief that it's kind of a fundamental belief that for real effective education, that our students need to be in front of our teachers. That's the best. I think we all get that. Nobody would deny it. One of the things that I keep going back to, because I think it is absolutely critical and important, other than what we're doing now with the learning loss that is going on, there's also the collateral damage that's being done to our students, our children. And that's something that I have a real difficult time grappling with. You know, we talk about mental health every once in a while. Well, it's a real thing. And, you know, we were going to have a report on it, I guess, coming up. And I certainly look forward to that, you know, with Mr. Warren's group. I talked to people from different backgrounds, some in the medical industry and some in the mental health industry. And one thing that they say for sure is that mental health needs of our children and adults, but specifically children, is really expanding at an exponential rate, and it's very, very damaging. So I want to make sure that people constantly get that brought up, that there is a price to not having school open. I did hear, and I do like the idea that our principals, who do know their schools the best, kind of sign on with us, and if there's something they need, well, that's our responsibility to get it to them. But they also need to sign on to say, yep, we're ready. Our school is ready. And I think that just is buy-in. It's reassurance for that school's community. So I do like that idea. One of the things that I keep going back to is what I mentioned a little bit earlier this evening, is the hands-on type of learning. Whether it's project-based learning, it's a CTE class that is trying to get students career ready, and those kinds of things. Even something as simple, well, maybe not simple, but even something like laboratory skills for kids in science, when they go to the next step, to college or to the workforce, there's an expectation that they have some experience hands-on with doing their laboratory experiments. That dovetails also with, of course, the hands-on with CTE type stuff. So that leads me to my conclusions of what I would like to see. I believe in the full in-person phased-in model, where the group that is identified on November 2nd would go back. The group that is identified, which is all elementary, go back November 9th. The 16th, it shows all middle schools. I agree. However, the only change I would make is that I would like all secondary to go back on the 16th. Now, if all secondary goes back on the 16th, that means everybody now will be in school. It's not a rush. It's not a big hurry, because that gives us 5 weeks. I think a day short of 5 weeks. But what that also does is it gives our kids 4 weeks of in-person instruction. What that does too is and I know one of those weeks is finals week, but still, it's still that contact with other students and with really getting their hands on the curriculum. It's to me so much more effective. And again, it's not a rush. We're talking 5 weeks. So that would be the only change to the material that was presented with the phase-in full in-person, is that we do the group on the 2nd, the group on the 9th, and then we add high school on the 16th with middle school. It's plenty of time to get it done. I had a really nice conversation with Mr. Palmquist today, and he said, you know, it's if we did do that, I proposed it to him, and he said that if that's what comes up, we can be ready. We're ready. We can do it. And he said, you know, everybody keeps saying, well, we all want to go back. Okay, well, it's urgent, but what do you say? It's urgent, but not hasty. And I think that's a really good way to say it. There is some urgency to us getting back, but we're not being reckless at all. 5 weeks is a lot of time to get all the ducks in a row that we need to do. And we will learn the week of the 2nd. We will learn the week of the 9th. And every week, I believe it'll be smoother and smoother for us. So I am in favor, again, recapping, the phased in full in-person with the additional change that I would like all secondary to go back on the 16th. Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Mr. Heberly. Mr. Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Bring up notes here. I don't have 12 pages, but I do have some here to talk about. First of all, you know, it's kind of interesting, and I want to thank everybody for their comments. And as we led up to this, it seemed like the emails were about the same number of those who didn't want to come back right away and those that did want to come back right away. So I think that there's a real division here in the district, of course. As a matter of fact, the only thing that we can all agree on, and everybody agrees on this, is it's better for our kids to be back in school at some time. And we need to work toward that direction. And I think that's a message that the board needs to send tonight, is that we want to go back to school. We want our kids back in school, and let's move in that direction. Now, we've listened to the advice that people have given and their comments. And just because we don't follow your comments exactly doesn't mean we're not listening. Oh my God, I've spent so much time on research on this thing. It's absolutely crazy. And there are a lot of different ways of going back that we should probably take a look at. But the one thing, and one more thing, people kept asking very specific questions. And I understand that you don't know the plans yet, and it's because no one has decided that we're going back yet. I've been out and I've talked to some principals. As a matter of fact, one principal gave me a tour of their school and described to me in depth the plan for that school, including drop-off points, including one-way hallways, including barriers and hand washing stations and everything. So the plans are there and they will be communicated in plenty of time, I'm sure. before any school starts. But that brings me to my next point. I've talked to a couple principals like that, and they have very specific plans for their school. So that's because one size does not fit all in this district. I would really like to see us give a little more leeway to our principals who know their staff, who know their people, who know their kids, their families. They should have a little bit more say in this. We shouldn't be making this final decision and make it just one size fits all, because it doesn't work. We've got 27,000 kids in this school district. We've got grades from TK all the way up to 12th grade, and then we've got adult learning as well. We've got continuation high schools. We've got CTE schools. We've got CTE courses. We've got old schools, and we've got very new schools. They all have a different way that they need to come back, and we need to recognize that. We've put some very good people in charge of those schools, and we need to let them do their job. So that's one of the things that I want to see as we move through this. A couple other things on some of the things. I was privileged to read a letter that the teacher union leaders of San Joaquin County had sent to Dr. Park, and it was pretty interesting. They've got some concerns, and those concerns need to be worked out in negotiation. So I will agree with that. Again, though, those negotiations, I think, need to lead towards opening the schools. If we need some guidance on that, Manteca signed an MOU with their union on September 17th, I think it was. It's on their website. You can go on there and see it. It's pretty interesting, and it's pretty specific. So that might be something that we take a look at as we go back to the negotiating table. Mr. Palmquist, I want to bring up one comment. Talking to my granddaughter, working with her, her high school is on a modified block. Now, they were 6 classes every day prior to COVID. What they've done now, so that there's not quite so much movement, is they do 3 classes on one day for 2 hours instead of 1 hour, and 3 classes the next day. So you don't have quite as much movement around. So I think that's something that we should possibly take a look at as well. We need to take a look at this distant learning option again and see where we're at. We need some specifics on that, and that needs to come quickly, like next week. So that needs to be put out on the table. We need to put that thing to rest so that people who want the distant learning option can get it. And also, if it requires them signing on to the distant learning option for the year, then so be it. It's not a good idea to be able to go back and forth. We can't adjust the manning that quickly. So that's the way it's got to be. I'm curious about the availability of testing. I didn't like that picture in the presentation about the testing station on Wilson Way. It doesn't do us any good. Testing is available that we can buy, and that would be part of our CARES money. So we need to get that, and we need to get it available quickly. It needs to be available to every school. Shouldn't be that hard to get. And then somebody mentioned something about AM, PM kindergarten kids come together. Don't have them come together. Okay? Keep it AM and keep it PM and keep the two separate. I also would like us to take a look if a school wants to go hybrid in doing a morning or an AM and PM on all grades on that as well. I do support going back. I am going to vote to go back, and I would like us to go back full time. I do think, though, that we need to make an exception where it doesn't work. Where you've got classrooms that are too small or classes are too big for us to accommodate some type of social distancing. I'm not sure that going into red allows us to abandon social distancing. I don't think that's the case at all. As a matter of fact, if we're going to open this thing up, if we're going to go to level 3, then we need to show even more caution than just saying, okay, we're back. That's level 4. We're not even close to level 4 yet. So we've got to manage this. And I do agree also, we need to get somebody whose sole job is to oversee this. And there are some good people out there. We've got one that I can think of right off the top of my head, who was a principal for us and just happened to be a Lodi councilwoman as well. She would be excellent since she's still around. So anyway, I'm sure we can find somebody. And Mr. Nava, that's all I've got for right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. Mr. Porter. Oh, yeah. Got to change it a little bit. No, I don't. I don't. I have to use my right here. See, I'm right-handed.
I have a few things that I want to talk about. I did a little bit of research, but not as much as I'd like to. First of all, the hybrid model as presented, I do not care for at all. I don't think that teachers, it's untenable for a teacher to go through that. That is just, you can't ask them to do that. And I've already voiced my reasons for that. It just doesn't work. In September, the United States was having 30 to 35,000 cases a day of COVID. Now we're at 50,000. Wisconsin, Montana, and the Dakotas are spiking. 30 states have more COVID-19 this week than ever before. Wisconsin has a field hospital opening this week. University of Washington, which has been a leader in statistical evidence, says there'll be 135,000 deaths within the next 3 months. 10 states reported record high COVID-19, 13% increase in child COVID-19 cases in 2 weeks. All right. Some schools have gone back and they've had to close. And it's starting in the west and starting in the east and starting to spread to the west. I also see irony too, or strange things. For example, we have sports conditioning going on, but yet our schools are closed. 2 out of 7 board members are not here tonight, but yet we're 6 feet apart as well here. Yet we're asking students to come back full time in rooms with no social distancing and teachers to deal with that. I struggle with that. If we ask our teachers and students to do this, we should do it as well. I think it's too early. My reasoning on this is I see people starting, I see counties, states, cities starting to come back, and then they have to close. The yo-yoing of going from school full to a distance learning is unbelievable. A teacher sent me a link that at Gregoria and Modesto, where some of the teaching staff came up COVID positive and they had to go in a 14-day quarantine. They were back in full, boom, they go back to distance learning. I don't know if we have all the information. Then it becomes an ethical issue for me. What if somebody has long-term effects from this? What if our students have long-term effects from this? Maybe not at the young grades. We don't know yet. But at the older levels, possibility in your high school ages. And we do know as they get older, they become more computable. As of now, we're still learning more and more about this virus. Some people have said it kills just as many people as the flu. There are many different types of the flu. There's only one type of COVID, and right now it's on track to do much more damage than the flu has ever done in 1 year. So, based on the information that's been provided to me tonight, I do not like the hybrid. I'm worried about our distance learning and what we're trying to provide. And I don't think we're ready to come back full. The phase is interesting to me. My suggestion is that we do not open up until after Christmas break. If you look at it on your dates, you also have Thanksgiving coming in after you want to open your high schools. And then you have Christmas. You also have your finals for high schools as well.
And the whole next 9 weeks to 10 weeks is chock full of areas where we'll be out of school. Will we learn more in January about this virus? Yes. Will we be better prepared? Yes. Will we have negotiated with our employees groups during this time? Yes. The only problem that comes up is if we haven't opened and we're in purple in January, then we can't open. Is that a bad thing for the health and safety of our students and people in the community? Because we do represent the community. So again, the ethical part of this, I'm of the idea that we wait until January to open our schools up in full. If the numbers continue to decline or we stay where we are right now, and by that time, we'll be able to work out negotiations with our employee groups. Also, we'll be looking at the safety of our students. They have no union. They do have parents that are advocating, some of them, to come back. But at the same time, we still are learning more about this virus. And it could very well be that if we wait 9 weeks, we learn more about maybe the long-term effects of being positive for COVID-19 if you are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way up to 18. So right now, I think it's premature. And I am of the mind to stay on DL until after Christmas break. Thank you, Mr. Nova.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Mr. Knaxak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nava. Yeah, I'm with some of the other folks. I have notes all over the place, and it doesn't seem to stream together very well. But first of all, I don't think I like the hybrid model at all. I think it has the potential of leaving students in the dust somehow, especially on 3-day weekends. So I think we're probably just better off staying exactly where we are before going to the hybrid model. One thing I did want to mention is that I did bring up the idea of live streaming, but I was really thinking more in high school for that. I don't think that would work in elementary schools at all because they're bouncing around a lot. But for high school, I think that could work pretty well still. I'm still in favor of the phase-in for full time because it gives us a chance to start full time with somewhat of a buffer. We're not just turning around next weekend and having the kids go back to school. Teachers will have time to change gears for full time instead of just doing it at the drop of the hat. And it also gives our special needs kids, which need to be in class like right now, to get in class very, very quickly. And I think the dates that Dr. Washer came up with is legitimate and reasonable to use those dates. I mean, I'm willing to change if someone can convince me that there's a problem with it, but it seems to be okay to me. And I think Ms. Neely said something about a need for adjustments. I agree with that. This is a plan. Does not have to be, if something comes up, we have to be able to move quickly and adjust if it's not working. So I guess to summarize, I am in favor of the phase-in, getting kids back in school with all the safety protocols that we can possibly come up with, and be able to spin on a dime if we need to. See, well, that's the short story, and thank you for that. Thank you, Ms. Nava.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you.
Ms. Nava, one other thing, I just did want to make something. Sorry.
Go ahead.
One of the things I haven't heard of anything about is the district offering a potential golden handshake to those teachers that are on the border of maybe thinking that I'm in their 60s and it's time to maybe find a greener pastures. So it's something that we might want to have staff take a look at if we want to offer some kind of a golden handshake to let people bail out a little early if they need to. So, okay, now I'm done, Mr. Nava. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Gary. Good point. Okay, Mr. Freitas. Freitas is going to pass. Ms. McFarland.
I'm going to lead with my decision, and then I'm going to give you my reasons. That I'm a big component, always have been, of face-to-face, full in-person.
Muted.
Oh,
Muted.
I could hear you.
You're right by me.
Next.
Can you hear me now? How's
Yeah.
that better? I'll rewind and do it again. I'm going to lead with my decision and then give you some of my reasonings. I have been and always will be in favor of face-to-face in-person teaching. I think that's the best when teachers are face-to-face with their students. So for those reasons, I would like to see us phase in and head back to school. Now, having said that, I also think that we need to be open to variations. I think once we sit down and talk to our teachers groups and our other bargaining groups, they might have some suggestions that they bring to the table that would alter the look of this. It doesn't change my opinion of going back to school. It might change the approach that we take. And I think that our unions need to have the opportunity to present and give us their suggestions of what they would like to see. I also think that the students' welfare needs to be taken into consideration. I don't believe we need to, I don't want to use the word rush, but if we don't start this until for 2 to 3 weeks or a month, I'm okay with that. I'd rather see us get it right than rush because we've given a date. I do think we need time to get all the PPE out where it needs to go. I think principals have to have the time to meet with their staffs and have a real discussion about how they're going to do it and some changes that are going to come from site to site. I agree with Mr. Neely that I do think each site should be able to put their twist on it with guidelines. I also want to make sure that parents know that this is another choice. There is a distance learning choice and there's an in-person choice. This is another choice. If this doesn't fit your family and your needs, then you stay on distant learning. And if you didn't choose distant learning from the beginning for the full year, you can try to get in on it now. Get a hold of your principal and figure out what works best for you in your house. Again, this is just another choice. And it's really the family's decision. And that's what I have right now.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland. Mr. Freitas.
Thank you, President. I'd like to thank staff for the report and the recommendations and for all the hard work that obviously went into this and it's innovative ideas. I'd like to.
You're muted. You're muted.
I'm sorry, we can't hear Mr. Freitas.
Hello, hello. Very good. All right. Thank you very much for unmuting me. I know all of you who are muted tonight against your will, how you all felt. But let me say, I'd like to thank staff for the report and their innovative ideas and all the hard work that also went into this. I'd like to thank everyone who spoke tonight. There was a lot of passion involved, and this is a very passionate subject. I do take offense to one thing, and I know that every single member of my colleagues and all 7 of us on this board care about kids and put kids first every single day. And it's their safety, as Mr. Porter was describing, that is very, very paramount to each and every one of us. I don't know if any of us could live with the thought that if any of your children in any way would be hurt from one of our decisions. And that responsibility that you've entrusted with is very, very important, and we take that to the utmost. I'm going to vote in favor of the plan, the phase-in plan, because I believe it is the way to get your kids into the classroom as quickly as possible. However, I do share in all of my colleagues' comments and ideas and statements that more than likely these dates are unrealistic, and that waiting would be the better time. But if there's any chance that we can safely and effectively and properly get kids in the classroom as quickly as possible, then I am going to be in favor of part of that. But as my colleagues have also pointed out, special care has to be done for a distance learning option for the district and special education. And in no way am I going to compromise the bringing kids back to the classroom in any rush to get something done or make sure that it's done unsafely or in an improper manner. So that is why I'm going to be supporting this plan, and I'm going to wish the district lots of luck in accomplishing it. But I'm also going to be holding them to the high standards and goals that this board believes in and has been entrusted with, to make sure that every single member of the Lodi family is safe in whatever we decide to do going forward. Thank you, President Nava.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. I'm the last one, so I've heard everybody speak. I've already had I don't like the hybrid. That's number one. Never liked it. I'd like to go full time. I like the plan that Dr. Washer and the cabinet figured out on the dates. I would like to make positively sure, I generally don't say this because that's to me micromanaging, but to make sure that we are safe. We are safe, Mr. Khan. I don't want anybody to tell me, well, we don't have this, we don't have that, and get complaints all over the place if and when we do open with kids in class full time. That's the most important thing for me, is for those kids to be safe, those staff members to be safe. If they have some type of medical excuse, I know Dr. Washer will get the medical excuses from their doctors, and we will honor that. But the thing is, we need to have these kids in a safe situation. I know it's almost impossible to have spacing in our school, especially in elementary school, high school. I mean, unless you have a class of 12, and more than likely the classes are over 30 in a high school, and each teacher has about 150 students. But I do believe that full-time is the best to try. We're allowed to do that. And again, just like a couple of people, and there's more people that have talked to me on the phone and email, is that we ought to set an example. We haven't set an example on this. We're talking about opening everything up, and then we close the shop here. I don't see any parents here. And I think my recommendation is the November 2nd meeting should be open to the public. If there's any objection from the board, let me know, or let us know. But this is an example. I mean, and then if we go spacing, then we got to do it to the kids. We want to come in here where everybody's got the mask requirement. If they have a shield, fine, and just like we used to before, with all safety precautions that we can have at our board meeting. And I don't care about the spacing. As long as you have your mask on, I believe that this would work. But we got to set example. That's the bottom line. If we don't set example, man, well, we're talking about all this requirements and the things we need to have full time, and it's not going to work. All right, Dr. Washer, we have consensus, and I'm going to name the board members as to their wishes. I took some notes and so forth, and I know their reasoning for it, and there's very good reasons, and some of them need to make adjustments, and I'm not going to talk about the adjustments because I don't want to take time on that, but Mr. Heberly says in full. Mr. Neely says in full. He has support going full-time except where it doesn't work, he says. And then, plans, in other words, there are other options, plans as to better our schools and back to school, and one side doesn't fit all and that type of thing. Okay, Mr. Porter has made the wish that he would like to wait the whole semester and go in distance learning till after Christmas, start of January. Okay, and good reasons for it. I don't disagree with that. Again, but it's a good one. Mr. Konaksak also said no hybrid model, but he likes to go full. And he says he's got to have these adjustments that need to be made whenever we go in full. Ms. McFarland also says she wants to go face-to-face, full-time in, and might change our approach, she says. So we have those. And then we have Mr. Freitas. Mr. Freitas, thanks the committee and so forth for their hard work and so forth. And he thinks it's a big responsibility. I agree with there's a big responsibility for board members to suggest and recommend to the superintendent this, and then something that we talk on the negative comes by, and I don't like it. But he is face in the plan. It says full time and share more than likely these days, and in full in special cases. So we got 5, 6 full, and Mr. Porter goes with distance learning. Now, one other thing that I felt to mention, if we do go in full, we have to offer an option for distance learning, and that's almost SOP to me, standard operating procedures, because I think that we should offer that to the parents and the students, the parents of the students that want to be in distance learning. And you have to, Dr. Washer, figure out the methods and so forth and how to get this done. Do you need anything else from us, Dr. Washer? Well, before I leave, I want to thank the speakers that were today. Thank you for all your recommendations, and I know that you brought some light to some of the safety factors that we need to have, and that's good. And I'm sure that Mr. Khan and his staff and all the people that are involved in setting up the places where these students are going to be coming in is taken care of and safe and clean and that type of thing. Yes, Dr. Washer.
Thank you, Mr. Nava, members of the board. Yes, I do need a little bit of clarification. Heard you loud and clear about the consensus on full return. What I didn't hear in consensus was the timeline. I heard varying degrees of, yes, this suggestion was okay, wait a little longer, get some things in place first, talk to groups first. So I'm not sure if you're comfortable setting a timeline right now. Do you need more information, more time to think and discuss? Or I didn't hear the consensus of this particular timeline. I heard a lot of variations.
Okay, Dr. Washer, Mr. Heberly has the consensus of November 2nd, 9/16. The only exception that he has is the middle school and high school start on the 16th. Mr. Neely did not give any dates, but he likes your plan. If I'm not mistaken, George, am I, George? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
On your plan, you phase it in. I think you said phase it in. I'm not sure what you.
I like Dr. Washer's plan, but again, I can't set a date. I can't be here on the board and set a date for every school. I think we should talk to him. I think that one of the big things is I like the fact that Dr. Washer proposes on getting our special ed students and some of our other students back to school as soon as possible. That needs to happen. So I agree with that. I would go no later than November 2nd. Everything else, we need to talk to our principals and we need to work out a solution on that.
Okay.
We've got time to do that.
Providing that that the negotiated items that need to be negotiated, that everything is well. Are you for
By the way, Joe,
are you
one of the things we need to understand too, Manteca has an agreement with their union about coming back and about PPE and everything. It's a 10-page agreement. We should take a look at that. And there's a basis for moving on right there.
I saw that and I read it all. The dates that they have, of course, is November 2nd, coming in with the groups of special needs and Liberty and Plaza Robles, and then November 9th, starting the school with the elementary, and then the 16th. I know that the 16th follows your plan, Dr. Washer, on the middle school. The only thing that we don't have, and I'm sure you probably want full consensus on the dates, or is it optional? What do you need?
Mr. Nava, members of the board, I need direction from the board, and we have direction that the board is interested in all students returning on a full schedule. I still am confused about timing, and I'm not, because I'm hearing, yes, this plan is good, but change this, and then a different board member changed this, and let's see about this piece. So I'm thinking maybe the board isn't comfortable at this point determining that. That's the sense I'm getting. Am I misreading this?
Well, we didn't. I think that Mr. Heberly came through with what he wants.
Right, but we can't do each piece of every board member.
No, we can't. We can ask board members as to what their wishes are.
Yes, but if one conflicts with another, which do we do?
Right. Then that's a dates. Yeah, dates are a problem. So yes,
I'm just sensing that the dates proposed here, except for maybe the special ed, is a little too soon. That's what I'm sensing.
Well, as I talked to Mr. Neely, he says your plan is good. Your plan is good. He says the special need kids need to start quickly. Mr. Kanak said no hybrid model, the same as the plan of breaking in easy, full time, and the dates that Dr. Washer are okay, he says. There might be some adjustments later on, but your dates are okay. Ms. McFarland, I did not hear the dates of school, but she likes a full-time face-to-face. Might change the approach. I did not get your dates. Are you following with Dr. Washer?
I am not comfortable with the dates until we have spoke to the bargaining units. I think the dates are in a range, but for us to say the 9th or the 16th, I think we're a little out over our skis, me personally, until we know that we've talked to all of our people to make sure that we can make it happen on time. So I would say the dates I'm not comfortable with.
Okay, you're not comfortable with the dates that Dr. Washer and her cabinet said.
Special ed, absolutely. Special ed needs to move for me.
And if the negotiations come through and they like the dates that Dr. Washer had? You're okay?
Are you negotiating?
No, I'm not negotiating. I'm just asking because I didn't get
What
the
I'm
full
saying
answer.
is if you go to bargaining and these dates are acceptable and you can make this work, I would get behind these dates. But I think if these dates are a sticking point, I understand why.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Freitas.
One of the problems that we also have is that we're on break tonight.
Pardon me?
We're on break this week.
Yes.
And our next meeting next Tuesday is when individuals have returned to school. So maybe finalize this. I think we have a consensus of secondary starting in January. So I don't think you have a problem with that, Dr. Washer. Is that correct? Okay. So what we're talking about is elementary and
yeah. Yeah, well, that's
PhaseIn plan.
That's see that yeah.
It's too late.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Not too late in January, too late tonight. But so I think we can finalize this next week. But I think staff, Mr. Nava, President Nava,
yes, sir,
has their marching orders to make this happen as quickly as possible, satisfy the demands of the board
and the union, and the negotiation.
Okay, I think I hear clearly. I'm going to try one more time. So we do have consensus from most board members about the full return. We are still looking at the dates and would like more discussion at our next board meeting, which I'm going to bring you a more detailed plan about all the other aspects as well. But I'm hearing that you would like to talk about this the timeline at the next meeting, which is next Tuesday. Is that accurate for the majority of the board?
Is that accurate? George? Gary?
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with these dates already, but if there's something comes up, yeah, I'm flexible, but these dates are fine.
All right. George?
Joe, the superintendent's looking for a date. We can't say a date.
Right.
There's too much yet to be done. We need to talk to other people. Now, the order of what you've got looks fairly good to me. But as far as the specific date goes, we've got some work yet to do. And I think we should get with our bargaining units as soon as possible and push that through. We do have a model of what's worked in other districts of about this size. We ought to be able to follow something like that.
Dr.
Can I
Washington?
ask one question?
Mr. Porter, you may ask a question.
A lot has come up about Manteca tonight. Mr. McGilligan, are you familiar with what was offered at Manteca? Because I thought there was a financial incentive as well. Am I on?
Yes.
Yes, I am familiar with what was at Manteca. They did sign an agreement. They went through mediation and impasse proceedings to get there, but they have signed an agreement. So I'm familiar with the agreement.
Is there a financial incentive included in the
I'm
MOU?
not that familiar. I think what I recall is it was a pretty well 10-page document laid out of the different levels of bargaining, what would happen under different scenarios. I don't recall the specifics of a financial settlement.
I'm just curious. Thank you for your information. Mr. Nava?
Mr. Heberly.
As a suggestion to try to clarify and speed along, on the report item, it does say suggested dates, but I think what that does is certainly gives you a starting point. And what it does is it gives everybody a target to start your discussions. So let me try this. November 2nd, if it works, do we want to do what the plan says on November 2nd? Do we want, and maybe cut it up that way? Would that help you clarify, or? I'm just trying to.
Yeah, Mr. Nava, members of the board, Mr.
Yes.
Heberly, thank you. I think that if the board is okay with us moving forward with a phase-in approach to full in-person instruction, I believe you said you're interested in us talking to our groups and getting it going as soon as possible. I think that we can work with that. I don't want to tie you down to a date that you're perhaps uncomfortable with, or that maybe may not pan out because of discussions or something else. So I think we can go with that. I'm looking at Cabinet to see if that's, if everybody's clear on that. What I don't want to have happen is I don't want our community to misinterpret this and that these dates then get published somewhere that we are coming back in this model on these dates, because what I'm hearing the board say is that you are interested in as soon as possible, you like this approach, you're okay with these dates, but you understand if there's going to need to be some adjustments or flexibility. Is
Well
that
said. Well said.
Clear?
Everything's clear.
Yes.
Yes. Proceed.
I'm getting some yeses.
Yes.
Okay.
Proceed.
Clear as mud, yeah.
I
Okay,
have
no.
another suggestion, is that as soon as our current break is over, that we may contact and we start getting things together with our labor groups, because I thought that what Ms. McFarland said is that, it might change our approach. They have a lot of great ideas. They're people in the trenches. They're the ones doing the work. It is our decision, however, with input and perspective from other groups coming in. So I don't want to wait on anything. I want us to get moving as quickly as possible, but we do have to give them the consideration that they're on break. So as soon as we can, let's get talking and get moving.
My understanding, if I'm not mistaken, that the next negotiation meeting is the 27th of October with Leah. Well, that's one of the groups that we have to talk to. I mean, besides the CSEA and all those people that are involved with the school system. So can we expedite them? Can we change the meeting? Bring it up? You can ask.
We are ready anytime.
Okay, I think if you ask, and it's important for them to help with the direction, I think it's good for teachers, good for parents, good for kids and everything, and we're not stalling. Okay? Any other things, board? May I have a meeting, motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, being moved by Mr. Porter, second by Mr. Neely to adjourn. Mr. Heberly? Mr. Freitas? Ms. McFarland? Mr. Knaxak?
Good idea.
Okay, I say aye, 7-0. Meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next Tuesday. Have a nice rest of the week and vacation time.
What the heck? How come it didn't? Oh.